The Ice Age is here. While the world struggled to survive, one man was turning the frozen frontiers into his own kingdom. In the middle of an unrecognizable, frozen city, where every piece of infrastructure had collapsed and transportation had come to a complete standstill, he was rising. An urgent report crackled through the airwaves. Earth had officially entered a new ice age, and the shift was accelerating at an alarming pace. Out in the field, a brave correspondent battled the cold, his microphone freezing over with every passing second. He struggled to keep his voice steady as he warned the nation. Global temperatures were still plummeting, with no sign of stopping. Yet, even as frost clung to his lips, he urged the people not to lose hope. Clenching his fist, he projected confidence, declaring that the government had not abandoned its citizens. As long as they stood together, this strong nation would endure, just as it always had. But before he could continue his speech of unity and resilience, the sky split open with a deafening roar. A frozen airplane, battered by the relentless storm, came crashing down from above. It tore through the city, plowing straight into the reporter and his entire crew. The screen flickered as the last remaining news station in the country broadcast its final moments. Shaky footage of the wreckage, the overwhelming silence that followed, and then static. A man watched this from his dimly lit, ice-ridden apartment. The frozen screen in front of him was the last window to the outside world. And now even that was gone. Han Feng barely reacted. His room painted a picture of someone who had fought for survival, but had long since given up. Empty boxes, scattered supplies, and remnants of desperate attempts to stay warm cluttered the space. Near the entrance, what little food he had left sat untouched. There was no point anymore. Then a sound, a frantic knocking at the door, followed by a panicked voice calling his name over and over again. Han Feng barely moved at first, letting the noise blend into the background of the howling wind outside. But when the voice didn't stop, something in him stirred. With stiff limbs, he finally stood up from his miserable nest of blankets and debris. Grabbing a steel bat, modified with nails, dried blood still crusted on its surface, he moved toward the door. He was gaunt, wrapped in the thickest winter where he could scavenge, but even that did little to protect him from the unforgiving cold. Step by step, he approached the door, pressing his eye against the frost-covered peephole. What he saw made his breath hitch. A woman stood outside, bundled up in layers, but still shivering violently against the brutal wind. Her face was red from the cold, her body trembling uncontrollably. And yet, even through the layers of frost and time, Han Feng recognized her instantly. Before the Ice Age, he had known her well, and now she was here. Han Feng opened the door, his face slightly flushed. Standing outside was Li Hyona, and he had no idea what she was doing there. The world outside had turned into a dangerous, lawless wasteland. Yet here she was, right at his doorstep. Still holding the bat in his hand, he urged her to come inside where it was warmer and safer. Hyona didn't hesitate. She swung the door open wider and stepped into Han Feng's relatively safer room. But before he could even process what was happening, she grabbed him by the collar and crashed her lips onto his. The speed of her movement was so sudden that her little bonnet tumbled to the floor. Han Feng's eyes widened in shock, but he didn't pull back. If anything, his face turned an even deeper shade of red. The kiss was intense, deep, and passionate. Long enough that anyone watching might have thought the world wasn't crumbling outside. But hey, if the world was ending, might as well go out with a sloppy makeout session in the middle of an abandoned hallway, right? When they finally pulled apart, both were left gasping for breath, tongue still slightly out, spit still dribbling. Han Feng, still dazed, finally managed to ask what had gotten into her. Of all things, why kiss him the second he opened the door? Hyona, still catching her breath, confessed with trembling words. She had finally realized Han Feng was the man she truly loved. All this time, it had been him. Tears welled up in the corners of her expressive eyes as she admitted that he was the one she was meant to be with. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal a person's true feelings, to see who really cares, who will stand by you no matter how hard things get. And speaking of hard, Hyona wasn't done proving her point. Taking Han Feng's hands, she placed them directly against her chest, letting him feel how fast her heart was racing. She wasn't lying. She wanted to be with him, no matter what. Hearing the word anything was enough to erase any rational thought from Han Feng's brain. Any hesitation, any doubts gone. All the red flags that should have made him pause, they had just turned bright green. Hyona pressed her thighs against him, grinding slightly, pulling him in closer. He didn't stand a chance. The world might have been frozen over, supplies might have been running dangerously low, but right now, Han Feng was heating up like never before. And something else was definitely rising in the lower regions. As Hyona gently caressed his cheeks, he met her gaze, his heart pounding as hard as hers. With all the sincerity he could muster, he confessed that her words meant the world to him. The doorframe was definitely not the right place for this. Hyona gently shushed Han Feng, making sure he didn't say another word. Right now, all she wanted was for him to close his eyes and feel the moment. Against his logical mind, Han Feng obeyed, letting his eyelids fall shut. But curiosity got the better of him, and he asked what was supposed to happen next. That was when another presence made itself known. A man, gripping the doorframe ominously, had arrived unnoticed. Without hesitation, he swung the frozen door wide open, locked onto Han Feng's head, and with a brutal force, brought down a blunt weapon with pure killing intent. Han Feng never saw it coming. His skull caved in before he even realized what was happening. Blood splattered across the apartment entrance, painting the icy floor in crimson. Hyona stepped inside alongside the mystery man, her body trembling as she stuttered in shock. She hadn't expected things to turn so violent so quickly. Her partner scoffed at her reaction, unimpressed. She needed to stop playing innocent. She knew all along that this was the only way things could go. The world had gone to hell a long time ago. One less mouth to feed didn't change anything. But enough about the brutality. It was time to see what Han Feng had been hoarding. If they played their cards right, they might just get enough supplies to survive until rescue came. The real horror, however, was that Han Feng didn't die immediately. He lay on the freezing ground, his body trembling, his mind clouded with pain. The blood from his shattered skull spilled out, only to freeze the moment it hit the floor. His vision blurred, his thoughts a mess. He wasn't sure what had happened, only that he couldn't move. Was this it? Was he finally dying? He would finally know what it felt like to lose his life. Through the haze, he caught one last cruel sight. Hyona and the mystery man, barely a few meters away, making out like nothing had happened. The man's hands roamed over her in ways Han Feng had only dreamed of, whispering sweet promises of reward for the perfect performance she had put on to make this all possible. Hatred burned within him. Even as his vision darkened and his consciousness faded, the weight of betrayal pressed down unbearably heavy. If there was another life after this, he swore he would never be a lovesick fool again. Then there was nothing, but in that empty void, something strange happened. Tiny droplets of light began to appear. At first, just a speck, but then it grew, becoming brighter, more substantial. Han Feng stared in confusion. What the hell was happening? His his very being felt strange. He subconsciously extended an arm, only to realize his skin was translucent, like he was something else entirely. The warm glow pulled him in, a stark contrast to the freezing cold he had suffered in the real world. Could this be the path to heaven? But just as he reached for it, the golden light shifted. Its warmth turned menacing, its glow deepening into an ominous crimson. Heaven wasn't supposed to be red. Before he could react, the light betrayed him. The moment he reached out, an unspeakable force took hold of him, and suddenly, his body, if it could even be called that anymore, was being torn apart. Limbs shredded, flesh ground into nothing. His very essence was being put through a meat grinder. Nothing ever went well for this man. His screams filled the dark void as the crimson light devoured him completely, piece by piece, atom by atom. He felt every moment of his destruction, every fragment of himself being scattered into nothingness. And then, he woke up. Cold sweat drenched his body as he shot upright, screaming like his life depended on it. The pain still lingered, seared into his very being. He had been seduced into closing his eyes, bonked on the head for being too damn gullible, betrayed, brutally killed, sent into an empty void, shredded apart on an atomic level. And now, he had no idea where the hell he was. Han Feng looked around, his eyes adjusting to the bright sunlight streaming through his balcony. The air felt fresh, lifting the curtains gently as it flowed into his clean, comfortable room. His bed was soft, untouched, and everything around him seemed peaceful, far removed from the cruel world he had grown used to. He sat there for a long time, taking in the sight, trying to process everything that had happened to him in the past few hours. It took him 30 full minutes to absorb it all, but in that time, he allowed himself to revel in the perfect view of the residential area outside his apartment. What he couldn't get over was the sunlight. It was shining again, warm against his skin. He had missed it. The warmth, the golden glow, the simple comfort of daylight. For so long, he had thought he would never feel this again. But here it was, wrapping around him like an old friend. He checked the date, his heart pounding. June 28th. As far as he could remember, the Ice Age apocalypse was supposed to begin on July 15th. He had been ambushed and killed in his previous life, but somehow, he was here again. Alive. Half a month before the end of civilization. It didn't take long for reality to settle in. He had been reborn, given a second chance. Not only did he retain the memories of his previous life, but something else felt different this time. Something strange was happening inside his body, something that seemed to have manifested in his hands. Ever since he woke up, his right hand had been wrapped in a faint red glow. He had tried wiping it off, shaking it away, even waving his hand in the air, but nothing made it disappear. It didn't hurt. In fact, it only felt warm. But aside from the light, it didn't seem to do anything else. At first, he thought he was imagining things. He had been lost in thought on the balcony for so long that the morning breeze eventually made him sneeze. As he wiped his nose, something strange caught his attention. The red glow on his right hand had mysteriously turned green. And then, before he could even process that, something happened that made his heart drop. His hand, still wrapped in that eerie green light, started to change. It was growing, lengthening, stretching as if his bones, flesh, and skin were expanding beyond their natural limits. Panic shot through him. This wasn't normal. This wasn't human. Fear and confusion took over. And without thinking, Han Feng rushed back into his room, slamming the balcony door shut behind him. His breathing was ragged, his chest rising and falling rapidly. But as soon as he was inside, his hand returned to its normal size. The green glow, however, remained. It lingered, unwavering, as if it had an endless supply of energy. He stared at it helplessly. Beams of light flickered from his palm, shooting out unpredictably. How was this even possible? How would modern science explain something like this? First, his hand had grown longer, and now, right in front of his eyes, it was slowly shrinking. The green light was erratic, unstable. It shifted unpredictably, unlike the red one that had stayed still before. But even though it was still a mystery, sitting down on his couch, Han Feng suddenly felt a pang of unbearable exhaustion. He hadn't done much aside from running back inside, yet his body felt completely drained. This had to be connected to the strange green light. Frustrated, he started swinging his arms all over the place, trying to get some kind of clue as to what was happening. Then, it hit him. Wasn't this just like the manhwa stories he loved reading? A sudden wave of excitement rushed through him. Without wasting a second, he sprinted to the kitchen and grabbed the sharpest knife he could find. In those stories, the protagonist always started by being reborn, often gaining cheat-like powers. Maybe, just maybe, he was experiencing the same thing. If he really had some kind of power, he had to test it out. Posing dramatically with the knife, he waited. Any second now, something incredible would happen. But nothing did. After a few minutes of standing there like an idiot, Han Feng scratched his head in embarrassment. The knife didn't react, and the mysterious light in his hand didn't change at all. He had been so caught up in the idea of gaining cheat-like powers that he completely ignored his exhaustion. And more importantly, the loud rumbling of his stomach. Reality hit him hard. He was starving. Unfortunately, the past Han Feng, who had been blissfully unaware of the impending apocalypse, was also an incredibly lazy guy who never bothered to keep proper food in his fridge. He opened it anyway, hoping for a miracle. Nothing. Not a single piece of edible food. This was bad. He had never felt this hungry before, and if he didn't eat something soon, he would probably pass out. His eyes darted toward the living room. There, sitting quietly on the table, was a clear jar of roasted soybean snacks. Leftovers from before the apocalypse. It wasn't much, definitely not a full meal, but it would have to do for now, just enough to hold him over until he could make a trip to the supermarket. Without thinking, he reached out and grabbed one of the roasted soybeans with his right hand, momentarily forgetting about the eerie green light wrapped around it. Hunger overpowered all other thoughts, and without hesitation, he tossed the soybean into his mouth. The moment it hit his tongue, a smoky explosion erupted right in his face. Thick fog billowed out, covering his entire upper body in an instant. Han Feng coughed, waving his hand through the mist, but what shocked him the most wasn't the explosion. It was the fact that he was now chewing on something completely different. A beanstalk. The roasted soybean had sprouted inside his mouth. He could feel tiny roots pressing against his tongue. and the stalk itself had extended outward, still growing. Panicking, he yanked it out, leaving behind an earthy taste in his mouth. Out of all the bizarre events he had experienced lately, this one was definitely near the top. Just moments ago, he was about to snack on some roasted soybeans, and now this. Strangely, he didn't feel tired anymore. It was as if that explosion on his face had erased the hunger he had been feeling. Looking down at his right hand, he noticed that the green light had vanished. Maybe this was connected to whatever had just happened with the soybean. To test it, he plucked a pod from the stalk and examined it closely. Splitting open the lush green shell, he found nothing unusual, just an ordinary, fresh bean sprout. But if that was the case, then what exactly had just occurred? Could this be the power he had been daydreaming about? No matter the cause, one thing was certain. This was an incredible discovery, something worth studying further. But there was no time for research when the more pressing issue was survival. Food was still a necessity, and with the end of the world looming, he had bigger concerns. Stocking up on supplies was the priority. For the first time in a long while, Han Feng stepped out of his apartment, feeling the warmth of the sun on his skin and listening to the birds singing in the sky. The streets of the commercial district were bustling with life. People going about their daily routines instead of locking themselves indoors in fear of the cold. It felt surreal. Han Feng walked with deep contemplation, replaying everything in his mind. First, the red glow around his hand had changed to green. That green light, shrinking and expanding, had made his heart race and drained his energy. Then, when he touched the soybean snacks, they had suddenly sprouted into a full-grown stalk. None of it made sense. Staring at his right hand, he was left with more questions than answers. What kind of power had been bestowed upon him? And more importantly, by whom? Lost in thought, he continued his walk, his pace unhurried, until a familiar voice called his name. A sweet voice, one that in the past might have made his heart melt. But now, it only made his blood boil. Han Feng didn't recognize it right away, but when he turned around, his expression darkened. Standing before him, flashing a wide smile, was the last person he ever wanted to see. Lee Hyona, the same evil which had led him to a brutal death. Her makeup was flawless, perfectly concealing the rotten personality beneath. She tilted her head slightly, her voice dripping with sweetness as she asked if Han Feng was out shopping too. She even employed her expert witch tricks, appearing as breathtakingly pretty as humanly possible, as if fate itself had brought them together in this place. But Han Feng hadn't even fully processed everything that had happened yet. And now, seeing Lee Hyona here, out in the wild, was starting to stir up the bitterness he had carried with him until his final breath. For 3 long years, she had been the goddess of his dreams. Han Feng had done everything, bent over backward, drained his wallet dry, humiliated himself, all just to make her happy. And for what? To be nothing more than a walking ATM. No, not even that. He wasn't in the friend zone. He was in the pay and leave zone. And to top it all off, she was the very reason he had ended up dead. Han Feng pinched himself hard, forcing himself to stay grounded and calm. This wasn't the time to act recklessly. Revenge could wait. First, he needed to handle a much more immediate problem: his supplies. If he didn't want to end up miserable and starving in this new ice age, he had to focus on survival first. Meanwhile, Lee Hyona had stepped closer, waving a delicate hand in front of his face. She pouted, teasingly asking what he was spacing out for. This had never happened before. There was a time when just hearing her voice would have been enough to make him weak in the knees. But not anymore. Swallowing down his hatred, Han Feng forced a smile, carefully crafting the mask he needed to wear. He chuckled and apologized, claiming he was simply speechless because of how stunning she looked today. She was just so radiant, he admitted, that he had gotten a little lost in the moment. Now, that was more like it. Lee Hyona let out a coy laugh, tilting her head ever so slightly. When had he gotten so smooth with his words? A confident smirk tugged at her lips. She thought she had him right where she wanted, eating from the palm of her hand, just like before. Encouraged by the response, she decided to go for the heart kill shot. Striking the most adorable pose in her arsenal, she playfully invited Han Feng to go shopping together. After all, they had already run into each other. But Han Feng had already reached his limit. There was only so much time he could stand in front of her without losing control of his rage. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, brushing past her as he casually apologized. They wouldn't be doing any shopping together today. Lee Hyona froze. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She had expected to get some free stuff from a pathetic simp, not be brushed off like this. Watching her stunned reaction, Han Feng couldn't help but acknowledge that her techniques were still as sharp as ever. But he wouldn't fall for them again. He wouldn't let himself be used as a personal ATM anymore. He wasn't that foolish. With his mind set, he walked straight toward the one place where he could get everything he needed, Waldemar Shopping Plaza. This place was the largest and most well-stocked supermarket in the entire eastern region. It was like Walmart, but of course, that brand was copyrighted. Of course, when the Ice Age hits, this place will be wiped out overnight. In the previous timeline, no one ever figured out who was responsible or how it happened. But Han Feng wasn't concerned about that right now. He was too busy with his shopping spree. He had already filled up one cart with supplies and needed to stock up as much as possible before society crumbled under the sheer cold. Scrolling through some internet forums, he checked a few generic apocalypse survival guides, and surprisingly, they were quite useful. He made a list of essentials: food, winter clothes, medicine, daily necessities, fuel, tools, transportation, and even weapons. There was a lot to prepare, and his excitement over gathering supplies had almost made him forget the real problem at hand: his personal wallet. His current balance was a measly 15,000 yuan, barely over $2,000. How was he supposed to secure a safe and comfortable life in the icy apocalypse with such little money? He needed way more cash. Just as he was racking his brain for a solution, a notification popped up on his phone. It was from an organization called Money Jar Loans, congratulating him on his approved eligibility to take out a loan of up to 168,000 yuan, over $23,000. A light bulb went off in his mind. There was no need to panic about funds. How could he have forgotten? Thanks to modern technology, he had an infinite money glitch at his disposal. There were dozens of lending apps that required minimal verification to approve loans, preying on those desperate for cash. Normally, getting buried in debt would be a nightmare, but in his case, it didn't matter. Once the apocalypse hit, there would be no one left to collect. Meanwhile, over in the commercial district, a frustrated woman angrily kicked an empty soda can down the curb. Her mood was foul, her eyes burning with irritation. It was none other than Lee Hyona, and today, one of her many devoted simps had actually dared to refuse her. She had gotten all dolled up, expecting to be spoiled, but instead, Han Feng had just taken off without even letting her drain his bank account. Her anger festered. What kind of pathetic loser ditches a girl like her? Especially one who doesn't even own a car. She vowed never to be nice to that worthless idiot again. Just as she was stewing in her frustration, a loud honk snapped her out of it. She turned to see a sleek, brand-new truck rolling up the street, fresh out of the dealership. It was still shining under the sunlight, looking premium in every way. The windows rolled down, and to her surprise, Han Feng was in the driver's seat. He had just pulled up, casually greeting her as if he had just happened to pass by. The moment her eyes landed on the vehicle, her earlier vow dissolved into thin air. The only thing she could see now were those luxurious leather seats and the smell of money. Han Feng stepped out, and when she asked if the car was his, he casually confirmed it. He even threw in an extra detail, claiming that he had just bought it earlier today. Curious, she pressed further, and without missing a beat, he spun a story about how his father had been killing it in business over in the United States, sending him a hefty amount of cash to splurge. He even added that he had just come from the airport after dropping his old man off. The moment she heard that, Lee Hyona's expression lit up. If his father was that wealthy, then this was an opportunity she couldn't afford to miss. Taking a deep breath, she put on her best performance. For the second time today, she lowered her gaze, her body trembling lightly. Knowing that Han Feng had taken his wealthy father to the airport, she suddenly became remorseful, apologizing for asking him to go shopping earlier when she didn't know he had such an important schedule. Then, right on cue, the tears welled up in her eyes. She sniffled, meekly telling him that she had felt abandoned and thought he was ditching her as a friend. Han Feng smirked, thoroughly entertained. If it were the old him, this Academy Award-worthy act might have worked. But now, he saw right through it. This girl was a professional manipulator. Without hesitation, he played along, wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling her closer. His other hand gently tilted her chin upward, locking eyes with her. Lee Hyona stiffened for a moment, startled by how bold he was acting. She had always seen Han Feng as one of her devoted simps, never someone this confident. But Han Feng wasn't done yet. With a smile laced with charm, he assured her that he would never ditch someone as important as her. For the briefest moment, an imperceptible twisted smile flickered across Lee Hyona's face, but she quickly wiped it away, returning to her sweet, sincere act. This time, she pulled out the big guns. She confessed that Han Feng was actually pretty special to her too. To prove it, she invited him out, lunch, a movie, anything to get to know him better. Just as she was about to ask for his answer, poof, Han Feng was gone. Like the wind, he had vanished without a trace. She stood there, stunned. Her heartfelt confession, her perfectly executed act, had been directed at nothing but thin air. Han Feng was already tinkering with the piles of boxes stacked in the back of his truck, grumbling playfully about how he still had to carry so many things despite his busy schedule. His complaints, however, were just for show. He didn't mind the work as much as he made it seem. Meanwhile, Lee Hyona, clearly frustrated that her earlier attack had failed, tried her best to maintain her sweet and composed demeanor. She asked why he had bought so much stuff, her voice carrying a forced curiosity. Han Feng, without missing a beat, brushed it off, saying that this amount was nothing special, just some things he liked. But then, to torment the witch even further, he threw in a blatant lie, enthusiastically telling her that he even got a present for her. Not wanting to show too much interest, Hyona simply smiled and waved goodbye as she turned to leave. She walked in the direction of her home, throwing out a casual remark about looking forward to the so-called gift. But the moment her back was turned to Han Feng, a sly smile crept onto her lips. In her mind, she had successfully handled her piggy bank yet again. On the other hand, Han Feng was simply enjoying the game, messing with the witch for his own amusement. Knowing her nature, he was well aware that he couldn't let her, or anyone else, find out about his growing stockpile of supplies. After all, everything he had gathered was his key to surviving the incoming apocalypse. Lee Hyona would just have to wait for her turn. When the world fell apart, Han Feng would make sure she got exactly what she deserved. And that mystery guy who had bashed him on the head, he wasn't off the hook either. His anxiety about the inevitable collapse of society had long since faded. Instead, an odd sense of anticipation had taken its place. Han Feng was actually starting to look forward to what was coming. The next day arrived, June 29th. Again, the date July 15th loomed in his mind. That would be D-Day, the beginning of the end. First, the heavy snow would arrive, blanketing the world in white. Then, the temperature would drop at an alarming rate, plunging to minus 20 degrees Celsius within a month. But that was only the beginning. The cold would continue to creep in, day after day, until the world reached a deadly minus 70 degrees Celsius. By then, everything would be encased in ice and snow, making it nearly impossible to even step outside. Han Feng had already secured his most important resource, food. His stockpile was massive, but it wasn't just about quantity. Everything had to be packed and sealed properly. The last thing he needed was for his nosy neighbors to suspect that he was hoarding supplies. Some of the more sensitive items had to be moved at night when no one was around. He didn't trust anyone enough to help, so he had to do all the work himself. Once the apocalyptic ice age began, the power grid would become extremely unstable. That's where his newest purchase came in, a heavy-duty generator, paired with enough fuel to keep it running for at least a year. With electricity secured, his next priority was heating. If the building's heating system failed, the consequences would be fatal. To prevent that, he called in specialized contractors to modify his home, ensuring it had independent heating. While he was at it, he also ordered reinforced doors and windows. He needed a dedicated storage space for his supplies, so he converted an empty bedroom into a stockpile room. By the time he had checked off everything on his carefully detailed survival notebook, the date was already July 14th. Just one more day before the temperature plummeted and chaos took over. The only thing left on his list was the one task he had been postponing, the main event. It was finally time to sit down and study his mysterious ability. That evening, Han Feng made himself a home-cooked meal, his mind occupied with thoughts of survival. Even with all his preparations, he knew that relying solely on stockpiled supplies wouldn't be enough. Sooner or later, things would get tough. But he had one potential answer, his strange ability to manipulate plants. If he could master it, it might be his only hope for long-term survival in the frozen world to come. The meal he cooked featured soybeans as its main ingredient, the very same beans he had conjured from a single roasted snack using his mysterious ability. He had spent hours racking his brain, trying different gestures and possible triggers, yet the lights hadn't appeared again. The activation seemed so random that finding the right trigger felt nearly impossible. But for now, there was a more immediate concern. Was the food he had conjured even edible? Who would have thought that tasting a few beans could feel so nerve-wracking? Han Feng hesitated before taking his first bite. Slowly, he worked his way through half a plate of beans, carefully monitoring his body for any strange reactions. But nothing happened. Even the soy milk he had made passed both the taste and safety tests. As he chewed on his meal, a realization struck him. His ability could provide edible food. This was a game changer. If he could spawn food reliably, survival would become significantly easier. But the real challenge lay ahead. He still had no control over the red and green lights. If he wanted to truly harness this ability, he needed to find a way to make them appear at will. So far, he had only experimented with soybeans. But what if he tried it on other things? Stealing his resolve, Han Feng opened his newly stocked fridge, determined to push his limits. The next few hours blurred together as he tested his power on various plants, running experiments from midday until the sun had nearly set. He had no idea how much time had passed, only that at some point, exhaustion had overtaken him. When he finally stirred, he found himself lying on the floor, his fingers gripping something tightly. As he forced his tired eyes open, he realized what it was, a massive broccoli. Slowly, he pulled himself up, barely registering the chaotic mess his kitchen had become. His head throbbed violently, a pounding sensation hammering against his skull. This wasn't just exhaustion, it was something deeper. He made a mental note. His ability came with a heavy toll on both his mind and body. If he pushed himself too far, he would black out and wake up with a splitting migraine every time. Shakily, he reached for a spoonful of his conjured beans, forcing himself to refuel. He had definitely pushed himself to the limit today, but at least he had uncovered something vital about his ability. Before blacking out, he had neatly arranged a variety of produce on the kitchen floor, experimenting with different crops. Some, like potatoes, showed no reaction to the green light at all. For some unknown reason, they remained unchanged. But not everything was a failure. Certain plants, like soybean stalks and wheat, grew from mere seeds into full-blown crops. Others reacted in a completely unexpected way. Instead of growing or staying the same, they exploded in his hands like miniature bombs. The first time it happened, Han Feng had been completely caught off guard. After the explosion, the plants didn't simply disappear. Instead, they transformed into a strange, coal-like substance, black, lightweight, and inedible. This was certainly an unexpected development, but after some quick tests, he found a use for them. When placed in a container and lit up, these blackened remains worked just like coal, providing a reliable heat source. Coming from a future where warmth was a luxury, Han Feng didn't hesitate to collect them. He might have lost a few crops, but in return, he had gained something equally valuable, an alternative fuel source. No more worrying about staying warm in the coming days. Despite the occasional successes, most of his attempts ended in failure. Each time a plant exploded, he simply tossed another blackened chunk into a growing pile. But then, as he moved on to a batch of store-bought seeds, he decided to take a different approach. This time, he focused entirely on his breathing, forcing himself into a meditative state. Minutes passed, sweat dripping down his face as he concentrated with all his might. And then, just as he reached his limit, something incredible happened. A massive broccoli materialized in his grasp. For a brief moment, he stared at it in shock, hardly believing what he had just accomplished. But before he could process it further, his vision blurred, and his consciousness gave out. As he collapsed onto the floor, one final thought crossed his mind. His success rate was still far too random. Then his body hit the floor. Thankfully, he was already sitting on the tiles when he lost consciousness, so at least the fall wasn't too brutal. Now that he was awake, and with a belly full of beans, he absent-mindedly played around with a piece of broccoli while deep in thought. He had spent all this time trying to figure out a pattern in his ability, but so far, nothing made sense. Still, he couldn't just give up. There had to be some kind of logic behind it. Even though there were still too many unknowns, today wasn't a total loss. He had made some decent progress. At least now, he had some understanding of the activation conditions. Who would have thought that the key to triggering this bizarre ability lay in his very own consciousness? All he had to do was enter a meditative trance. His method? Simple. He imagined himself out in nature, stripped of all human constraints. In other words, buck naked in his mind palace, walking barefoot on the soft soil, feeling the earth beneath his soles, basking under the warm sunlight as life around him thrived in perfect harmony. Just like Adam in the Garden of Eden, his body and mind became one with nature, resonating with the pulse of all living things. And once he reached that state of mind, he slowly opened his eyes. Sure enough, that familiar green glow appeared once again. This ability of his was directly connected to his consciousness. Working from that concept, he realized he could now freely summon the green light. With all the plant samples tested, albeit with a depressingly low success rate, it was time to switch things up. For the second round of experiments, he was going to try something different: meat. He picked up a juicy slab, his right hand still wrapped in that eerie green glow, and carefully moved it toward the surface. He already had a bad feeling about this, but still, it was disappointing when nothing happened. Maybe the green light only worked on plants? Still, he wasn't giving up just yet. If the gentle approach wasn't doing the trick, then maybe a firmer one would. Grabbing the meat with both hands, he squeezed it with all his might, practically willing his right hand to do something magical. Several minutes passed. Nothing. Defeat was written all over his face. The tired, dejected look of a man who had just squeezed raw meat like a stress ball for science and gotten absolutely nothing in return. That was when a thought hit him. Back when he was meditating, he had sensed two distinct colors, green and red. He had only been using the green light so far, but what if he was missing something? Grasping the primary trigger function of his ability, he focused on a new objective. This time, instead of calling forth the green light, he concentrated on the red one. Still holding the meat, he closed his eyes and reached deep into his consciousness, searching for the dormant power hidden within his system. After a little while, a spark of red light finally flickered to life on Han Feng's right hand. With that tiny spark, the glow rapidly spread, wrapping around his entire hand. And surprisingly, the piece of meat he was holding. It didn't just stop there, though. The moment the light touched the meat, a bubbling reaction erupted across its surface, as if the poor thing had just been tossed into some forbidden alchemist cauldron. A few seconds of intense concentration later, Han Feng opened his eyes, only to be greeted by a truly abominable sight. What was once a decent chunk of meat had transformed into a hardened, dark red sludge. A thing so putrid-looking it could have been a rejected horror movie prop. The moment the red light faded, he instinctively flung the disgusting lump onto the ground, utterly repulsed. And honestly, who wouldn't? If something you were holding suddenly morphed into a demonic meat puddle, you wouldn't be keeping it in your hands either. But as gross as it looked, Han Feng wasn't about to let a potential discovery go to waste. Swallowing his disgust, he crouched down to observe the strange substance more closely. He poked it. Squish. Oh, so that's the texture, huh? The way the meat reacted to the red light was interesting. Revolting, yes, but still interesting. It wasn't just breaking down, it almost seemed cooked. But if all the red light could do was heat things up, that wasn't exactly groundbreaking. Stoves existed, pans existed, and they could produce way better meals than whatever this abomination was. Han Feng refused to believe that was all there was to it. Activating his abilities again, he focused harder, trying to understand what this power was truly doing. The sensation of the red light felt eerily familiar, almost like a disintegration process. With that realization in mind, he moved on to his next experiment, determined to get clearer results. And sure enough, his second attempt turned out far better than the first, meaning he might actually be onto something. Now, for the real test. He grabbed a handful of soybeans from his bean pile and clenched them tightly in his right hand. Meanwhile, in his left hand, he held the red light-infused meat. If the green light represented evolution, then did that mean the red light was its opposite? Disintegration? The thought was wild, but there was only one way to find out. With both forces in his hands, he pushed them together. The reaction was instant. A brilliant, blinding flash exploded between his palms, far stronger than anything he had expected. When the light finally faded and his vision cleared, he looked down at his hands. And there it was. His meat had gotten bigger. The meat had been supersized, no doubt about it. But hold on, where did the soybeans in his right hand go? Han Feng squinted at the massive slab before him. Could it be that the two ingredients merged? Did he just create some mutant super meat? Intrigued, he meticulously inspected his creation. No matter how he looked at it, this thing was incredible. It looked, felt, and even smelled just like real meat, except somehow even fresher. This was next-level stuff. With a newfound sense of confidence, he figured he was really getting the hang of this whole superpower deal. And so, naturally, he dove into more experiments. Hours later, his kitchen looked like a war zone. Charred remains of meat and crops were scattered everywhere, the smell of burnt failure lingering in the air. With a frustrated groan, Han Feng finally snapped, throwing a full-blown tantrum. Everything he tried had failed miserably. After getting all that exasperation out of his system, He sat up, took a deep breath, and accepted defeat for now. He could always take his time figuring out the deeper intricacies of this strange ability later. No need to rush genius. Despite the bitter and charred ending to his day, he had still made progress. And, more importantly, he could see his future. If he could just master this power, there was no doubt in his mind. He would be the man standing at the very pinnacle of this post-apocalyptic world. Infinite resources, ultimate survival, and, of course, he could make sure his future self had some sweet muscles while he was at it. But speaking of survival, food alone wasn't going to cut it. Sure, he could conjure up meals, but what good was all this loot if he couldn't protect it? He was completely vulnerable without a proper weapon. Realizing this, Han Feng quickly gathered the scattered crops from his floor. He had to hurry. Time was running out. A quick glance out the window confirmed his worst fear. Snow had begun falling from the sky. It was here. The average person might just think this was a normal snowy evening. But it wasn't. Just like in his previous timeline, this wasn't a winter wonderland. This was the beginning of the end. The collapse of modern civilization had officially begun. Stepping outside, Han Feng couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at him. The temperatures were expected to drop to 45 below within the week. If he didn't get a gun soon, he'd be in serious trouble. But there was one tiny problem. Buying a gun in this country was completely illegal, and it's not like he had any underground connections. So what now? That's when his ears caught onto a loud voice nearby. A man was boasting to a passerby, practically shouting about how he was a big shot in construction, with millions riding on every project. He wasn't just bragging. He was making sure everyone around knew he had connections to Lao Wang from the Shigong Lida group. According to him, they were so close, they were practically brothers. Han Feng glanced over and immediately recognized the guy. Of course it was him, a bleach-haired thug with a questionable sense of fashion, dripping in fake-looking jewelry, wrapped up in over-the-top streetwear, and for some reason, always offering people cigarettes. Around here, people called him Homeless Joe. Not that Homeless Joe was his real name. He went by Li Zi, but he loved being called Brotherly. He lived in Han Feng's neighborhood and was supposedly in charge of contracting projects. In reality, though, the guy had no real job. He just liked to act busy. He was always on the move, pretending to negotiate multi-million-dollar deals over the phone, making sure everyone within earshot heard just how successful he was. Despite being a complete deadbeat, Han Feng figured Joe, Brotherly, probably had the right connections to help him out. Taking a deep breath, Han Feng approached him, putting on his most awkward yet friendly smile. He greeted Brotherly like an old friend, waving as if they hadn't seen each other in ages. Brotherly, however, didn't seem impressed. He squinted at Han Feng, clearly trying to recall if they had ever met before. If they had, it definitely wasn't memorable enough for him to care. Sensing the hesitation, Han Feng quickly introduced himself as Xiao Han, a respectful way of calling himself Little Bro, and insisted that they had met before, maybe a while ago. Brotherly didn't seem entirely convinced, but shrugged it off, muttering something about being swamped with work lately. Too many projects, too many numbers in his head. Couldn't be blamed for a bad memory. Of course, Han Feng knew better. The guy was probably just swamped with fake business calls. Still, at least he was willing to chat. Han Feng hesitated for a moment. He was about to ask for something very illegal, and he had no idea how Brotherly would react. Glancing around to make sure no one was eavesdropping, he finally leaned in and got straight to the point. He needed a gun. The reaction was immediate. Brotherly visibly stiffened, his whole body tensing as he took a step back. His first instinct was disbelief, demanding to know why in the world Han Feng would need that of all things. It wasn't exactly the reaction Han Feng had hoped for. A wave of guilt crept up on him, but there was no turning back now. He needed this. Brotherly, however, suddenly grew serious. His usual bragging and playfulness disappeared. He made it clear that his organization didn't engage in any illegal activities, especially something as dangerous as weapons. But despite the firm stance, there was an unspoken implication in his words. That kind of thing was serious, and not something ordinary people should be mixed up with. Han Feng barely managed to push the thug's questionable Louis Vuitton bag out of his face before clarifying that Brotherly had it all wrong. He wasn't trying to get into anything shady. He was just inquiring about a firearm for self-defense. That's all. Of course, he couldn't just leave it at that. So, naturally, he started lying his ass off. On the spot, he spun a completely made-up story. According to him, it all started one day when he was riding his bike to work like usual. Out of nowhere, he ran into this nasty old man who was casually spitting everywhere, right in the middle of the bike lane. Gross, right? But wait, it gets worse. The wind carried one of those disgusting globs of spit right into Han Feng's face. At that point, he had seen enough. In pure rage, he tossed his bike aside and confronted the old geezer. But instead of apologizing, the absolute menace had the audacity to spit on him again. That was it. Han Feng had no choice. He had to deliver some good old-fashioned street justice. Right there, in the middle of the road, he taught that old man a lesson. With a whole crowd watching, the guy left the scene with tattered clothes, a bruised face, and burning humiliation. But before he scurried away, he swore he'd get revenge. And, well, he wasn't kidding. The very next day, the old man was back, this time patched up and waiting for Han Feng on his usual bike route. But he didn't come alone. Nope, he had goons. What followed was not a proud moment for Han Feng. They jumped him, badly. His clothes were ruined, his face was bruised, his body was aching. He had never been so humiliated in his life. And that, right there, was why he needed a weapon. For self-defense. That was the long and short of it. Well, mostly long, but it seemed like an effective story. Brother Lee was fuming. Just the thought of that disgusting old man spitting all over the streets had him seeing red. That wasn't even a main point of Han Feng's story, but hey, if outrage was what got him results, he wasn't going to complain. With a dramatic pat on the shoulder, Brother Lee reassured him. This vendetta? Consider it handled. He'd call his big brother right now and get that gun. No problem at all. Han Feng wasn't sure if he should feel relieved or deeply concerned. Before he could think too much about it, Brother Lee was already inviting him to the station so they could hop on the bus together. His excuse? His Panamera was in the shop for servicing, so he couldn't drive to the headquarters. Han Feng blinked, then casually pointed to his own car, parked right there on the side. Instantly, Brother Lee's entire demeanor shifted. His eyes locked onto the brand new vehicle, and suddenly, all that tough talk took a back seat. The entire drive to his so-called big brother's place, he couldn't stop gushing about how Han Feng was living the good life. The dude went full interrogation mode, demanding to know how much the car cost. The answer? $700,000 of borrowed money. But of course, Han Feng didn't exactly advertise that part. Meanwhile, Brother Lee was busy snapping pictures of himself in the luxury leather seats. His social media handle, Handsome Spicy Guy, was about to be updated with the most delusional flex of the night. As Han Feng followed his directions, left turn at the next intersection, Brother Lee casually captioned his latest post. Something about how his SUV's seats were still too hard because they were too new. By the time they finally pulled up, the scenery had taken a turn for the worse. They were now in one of the seedier parts of the city. Outside, a group of rough-looking guys had gathered, grumbling about the ridiculous weather. And honestly, who could blame them? It had skipped straight from summer to a brutal winter overnight. No warning, no transition, just straight-up suffering. Their complaints were cut short when a sleek-looking set of wheels rolled up. All eyes turned toward the car, curious to see who was about to step out. The moment they recognized Li Ziyi, their interest skyrocketed, and they rushed toward him, eager for some news. Brother Lee, ever the smooth talker, casually mentioned that he had some business to handle with Boss Liu. That was all it took for the other thugs to make their own assumptions. Their eyes darted back to the brand new Tiger SUV, and before long, they were hounding him about the price. Now, did he own the car? Absolutely not. Did he deny their assumption? Not even a little. Instead, he puffed out his chest and proudly declared that he had dropped a cool 700 grand on it. Han Feng, standing nearby, couldn't even be mad at the sheer level of shamelessness. Bragging about a car that isn't yours while the real owner is literally standing right there? That's next-level confidence. Once they stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. Boss Liu, a man who practically radiated hardcore gangster energy, came out, clearly annoyed that Brother Lee had the audacity to bother him this late. Lee, who had been acting all big and bold outside, suddenly toned it way down, even offering the boss a cigarette like a polite little office intern. Boss Liu, however, was not in the mood for small talk. He was a busy man, and he made that very clear. Without wasting time, Brother Lee introduced Han Feng as a buyer of something special. The moment the words left his mouth, Boss Liu narrowed his eyes. Did he just hear that right? His gaze shifted to Han Feng, who immediately stiffened under the intense scrutiny. One wrong move, one wrong word, and he had no idea what might happen next. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Boss Liu just stared, cigarette dangling from his lips, looking Han Feng over from head to toe. Then, just when the tension was about to snap, Boss Liu smirked. Turns out, he was actually disappointed. He had been expecting something interesting, but all Han Feng wanted was a measly gun? Boring. Without another word, he gestured toward one of his guys, Chang Zi. The henchman knew the drill. Digging into his jacket pocket, he pulled out a pistol and casually tossed it onto the table. Boss Lu didn't even flinch as he named the price, 6,000. Easy to conceal, reliable, and just what Han Feng needed. Right? Apparently not. Han Feng hesitated before politely declining. A handgun wasn't really what he had in mind. He needed something bigger, something longer, something that required a scope to fire. The entire room went dead silent. Boss Lu's expression darkened as his gaze bore into Han Feng. And just like that, our boy realized he might have just crossed a serious line. Without another word, he shut his mouth so fast, it was as if he had swallowed his own tongue. Then the explosion came. Boss Lu snapped, shouting about how insane it was to casually walk in and demand a freaking sniper rifle like this was some kind of shopping mall. This was a discreet business, not a damn supermarket where you could just pick and choose from an illegal weapon catalog. And just in case Han Feng still wasn't getting the memo, Boss Lu made it crystal clear. His final offer? The pistol on the table. Take it or leave it. Brotherly had to step in before things got messy. The boss wasn't exactly the most patient guy, and convincing him required some serious improvisation. So in classic Homeless Joe fashion, Lee decided to weave a completely made-up backstory for Han Feng on the spot. Apparently, 5 years ago, Han Feng had a wife. A non-existent wife. Under the relentless snowfall, Brotherly worked his magic, crafting a tragic tale so convincing that the boss sat through the entire thing without interrupting. And the best part? It worked. By the time Lee wrapped up his masterpiece, Boss Lu was fuming. The story must have been next level because he was this close to snapping the table in half. He kept muttering about how disgusting those people were. How dare they do such a thing to Han Feng? According to this new reality, Han Feng had 3 kids. But plot twist, none of them were his. Han Feng, meanwhile, just stood there, silently accepting the absolute nonsense spewing from Lee's mouth. Even for someone nicknamed Homeless Joe, this story was outrageous. But hey, if it worked, who was he to argue? And it worked. Boss Lu, now emotionally invested, gave his personal guarantee. Han Feng would definitely get his sniper rifle. No questions asked. He'd personally make it happen, though it might take a few days. Everything would be arranged through his henchman, Chang Zi. But that wasn't all. Apparently, the boss had gone all in on this newfound brotherhood. Not only was he securing the sniper rifle, but he also wanted Han Feng to be fully prepared. So, just like that, he handed over a handgun, completely free of charge. A gift, man-to-man. Han Feng was speechless. Somehow, through the sheer power of nonsense, Lee had pulled off the impossible. The boss had bonded with Han Feng over a fictional tragedy, and now, here he was, fully armed, no questions asked. With business settled, Boss Lu went back to his phone, handling actual pressing matters. But before they left, Han Feng figured he should return the favor just a little. So, with the most serious look he could muster, he casually mentioned that a buddy of his, someone working for the government, had told him that, due to the abnormal weather, purchase limits on supplies would be implemented soon. Meaning, it was best to stock up now, before it was too late. Boss Lu, despite being a man of the underworld, couldn't ignore how convincing Han Feng sounded. He gave a firm nod, taking the tip very seriously. And with that, Han Feng and Brotherly walked out of the city's underbelly, one firearm secured, and somehow, a completely fabricated past that had just won them a huge favor. On the way back, Lee couldn't stop gloating about how flawlessly he had handled everything. According to him, it was a masterclass in business negotiations like a boss. And now that his big brother, the big boss, was in a great mood, they could probably even ask him for a cannon and get yes. The confidence was off the charts. Han Feng, feeling somewhat grateful despite the headache-inducing bragging, decided to buy the thug some cigarettes as a thank you. Brotherly, of course, tried to be humble, insisting that he did what he did purely out of the goodness of his heart, but then casually mentioned that he'd graciously accept about 7 or 8 cartons of his beloved Huazi cigarettes. He even threw in a promise to take Han Feng to a sauna once he got paid for his latest so-called project. Meanwhile, Han Feng was already planning his next steps. Supplies secured. Weapon obtained. At the very least, he had what he needed for the early days of the apocalypse. Now, he could focus on properly studying his abilities. But if he really wanted to thrive, solving the food problem was going to be key. Long-term survival would skyrocket if he could figure that part out. Lost in thought, he barely noticed the icy patch in his path. One misstep later, and boom, he was airborne. A second later, he crashed to the ground. Pain shot up his leg, and reality hit fast. In all his careful apocalypse planning, he had completely ignored one of the golden rules of an incoming ice age. Don't get injured. Judging by the sharp pain radiating through his leg and the way he landed, there was a very real possibility that something was actually broken. Brother Lee, in a rare moment of concern, rushed over, looking completely lost on what to do. Han Feng, gritting his teeth through the pain, fumbled for his car keys and handed them over, requesting to be taken to the nearest hospital ASAP. But Lee, rubbing the back of his head, hesitantly admitted that there was a small problem. He didn't have a driver's license. Insisted he couldn't drive without one. But let's be real, the dude just couldn't drive, period. At the very least, he didn't abandon Han Feng to writhe in pain on the freezing ground. He tried to lift him up, offering his shoulders for support. But given how much he struggled, it was pretty clear that neither of them was going to make it to the hospital alive at this rate. With no other choice, Han Feng called for a taxi. And of course, he had to pay for it, because Lee, unsurprisingly, was broke as hell. Even the hospital, a place that was supposed to be an essential establishment, was struggling under the intensifying blizzard. Snow was piling up fast, burying the roads, and the whole building was starting to freeze over. Inside, in the nurse's office, someone named Jion was just settling into her night shift. The storm outside was relentless, and the emergency section was severely short-staffed. Unfortunately for her, calls from the hallway were already pouring in. She had barely started her shift, and it was already shaping up to be a long night. After getting an x-ray at the hospital, it was officially confirmed Han Feng had really broken his leg. The doctor pointed to the scan, explaining that there was a stable fracture on his right tibia. Nothing too serious, easy enough to set, but he'd have to stick around for an hour under observation before heading home with his meds. Of course, this little accident couldn't have picked a worse time to happen. The apocalypse was about to kick off in full force, and here he was stuck in a hospital, regretting every careless move that led to this moment. Brother Lee had been with him for most of the process, but of course, the guy had big deals to handle. Probably another multi-million-dollar phone call waiting for him. Still, credit where it's due, the dude was a real one. Before leaving, he made sure to hand Han Feng his number, just in case he needed anything. Now alone in the hospital lobby, Han Feng let out a long, heavy sigh. The situation outside was bad. The blizzard was making things worse by the second, and the hospital was overflowing with accident victims. Emergency beds lined the hallways, a grim sign of just how quickly things were spiraling out of control. But Han Feng had only one goal: grab his meds and get out before the roads closed for good. Just as he was contemplating his life choices, something, or rather, someone, walked right into his field of vision. A goddess. Well, technically it was the head nurse. But in this chaotic, freezing nightmare of a world, she might as well have been divine. Head nurse Jion had arrived to support the overwhelmed emergency staff. Without missing a beat, she moved to the first bed, tending to a patient with severe wounds. Next was bed 5, where a patient had just been treated. Fortunately, vitals were stable. She instructed the attending nurse to administer another dose of glucose in 10 minutes, adding that if the patient's heart rate dropped below 80, epinephrine had to be given immediately. She was all business, moving swiftly through her rounds, her skill and confidence undeniable. Han Feng, however, was completely distracted. Not only was she incredibly competent, but she was also young, far too young to already be a head nurse. A generational talent, no doubt. And on top of that, she was stunning. Even in the middle of a hectic night shift, she handled everything with grace, her smile never fading. She was practically an angel, which is exactly why Han Feng felt just a little bit guilty when his gaze accidentally strayed toward, well, ungentlemanly areas. Realizing what he had done, he immediately looked away out of respect. But seriously, was this woman completely unaware of the effect she had on people? A real airhead, this one. Out of nowhere, the old man sitting beside him suddenly called out to the pretty head nurse. She wasn't really required to tend to patients outside of her rounds, but still, head nurse Jion approached with a polite smile, always the professional. Apologizing sweetly, she explained that she was covering for a staff shortage and needed to prioritize urgent cases, but she promised to check back later. The old man, however, wasn't having it. Complaining about unbearable back pain, he insisted that she take a quick look right now. In reality, this bastard wasn't here for medical care. He was just a filthy old perv trying to film under her skirt. Completely unaware of what was happening, Ji-yeon just smiled and apologized again, suggesting that an X-ray might be needed to properly diagnose the issue. But the creep wasn't backing down. He got pushier, urging her to just take a quick look while conveniently pointing to the exact spot where it supposedly hurt. Then, the audacity, he actually got up from his seat and placed his hand on her waist. Being the airhead that she usually was, Ji-yeon only laughed, too ticklish to realize what was actually going on. She reminded him, in her usual cheerful tone, that back problems should really be checked by the resident physician. But the old perv took this as an invitation, his hand creeping lower. This disgusting act might have gone on even longer if not for something, or rather someone, that decided enough was enough. A freaking flying crutch came out of nowhere, smashing directly into the old creep's back. If he wanted to complain about back pain before, well, congratulations. Now he had a real reason. The impact knocked his phone straight out of his hands, sending it skidding across the floor. Ji-yeon, ever the kind-hearted nurse, instinctively moved to check if the old man was all right. But before she could even react, Han Feng stepped in, humble as ever, apologizing with the utmost sincerity. His crutch, apparently, had accidentally flown to the side. After all, this was his first time using one. What a coincidence. Bending down, Han Feng immediately zeroed in on the phone, casually wondering if it had broken from the fall. The reaction was instant. The perv panicked, sweating bullets as he screamed for Han Feng to stay away from the phone. Bad move. Han Feng, completely ignoring the protests, made his way across the room. His bandage got messed up in the process, but he did not care. There was no way in hell he was letting this revolting leech get away with something this disgusting. And sure enough, the moment he unlocked the phone, his suspicions were confirmed. The proof was right there, on the freaking home screen. Han Feng's gaze slowly lifted, locking onto the old creep. If looks could kill, this geezer wouldn't just be dead. He'd be 6 feet under, with no funeral in sight. This pervert had the audacity to film up the skirt of a hardworking nurse, assault her, and then throw a tantrum when caught. There was no good reason why Han Feng shouldn't just call security right now and have this lowlife escorted straight to jail. Well, let's be honest, pervs like him were taught some very harsh lessons. But Han Feng had a better idea. Tightening his grip on the phone, he made it very clear he was keeping it. And if he ever saw this old creep near this hospital again, he swore he would personally ruin his miserable, disgusting life. The bastard knew he had no choice. The first chance he got, he scrambled up from the hospital floor and bolted for the exit, running like his life depended on it. Because, well, it probably did. Meanwhile, head nurse Ji-yeon was left utterly baffled. Just moments ago, that old man had been groaning about severe back pain, yet he had taken off running like an Olympic sprinter. How did that make any sense? Han Feng, on the other hand, had just witnessed what was possibly the most comically naive person he had ever met. He sighed and decided to show her exactly what the old creep had been up to, holding up his phone and recording from an angle that was way too suspicious. Judging by her reaction, she genuinely hadn't noticed a thing. Unbelievable. Without a word, Han Feng handed her the phone, letting her decide whether to delete the footage or turn it over to the cops. He also took the opportunity to remind her to be a little more careful. People like that perv would take advantage of kindness in a heartbeat. Instead of being shaken, she simply flashed a smile as radiant as 1,000 suns. And then, as if nothing had happened, she casually asked, wasn't his leg supposed to be broken? At that moment, it hit him. The adrenaline from catching that old creep had completely numbed the pain in his leg. But now that it was over, the pain came rushing back with a vengeance. He let out a scream of pure agony. Thankfully, head nurse Ji-yeon was an expert when it came to these kinds of injuries. She swiftly reset his cast with the skill of a seasoned professional, her hands moving with practiced ease. Once she was done, she looked at him expectantly. Better now, or at least, that was what her expression seemed to say. Han Feng let out a deep breath, grateful that she had fixed up his broken leg. He assured her that the pain was gone, at least for now. For a brief moment, the crowded room seemed to fade away, almost as if only the two of them existed in that space. Ji-yeon, still beaming, expressed her gratitude in return. She promised that from now on, she wouldn't let creeps like that get away with their nonsense. In fact, she swore that she'd make sure to punch them really well next time. Han Feng, however, just wanted her to be more aware of her surroundings. A noble thought, but clearly, she had learned absolutely nothing. Why? because at that exact moment, she was unintentionally pressing his injured leg against her, completely oblivious to what she was doing. Han Feng could only sigh. Yep, still just as clueless. Before he could say anything, another nurse rushed over, calling for Ji-yeon as her help was needed in the emergency section. Before heading back to her rounds, Ji-yeon turned back to him one last time, reminding him not to forget his checkup in a week. Han Feng promised he would come back, but deep down, he knew the truth. A week from now? That felt almost impossible. Instead of explaining, he simply smiled helplessly. Taking the crutch he had heroically sacrificed against the old perv, he adjusted his grip and limped his way out of the hospital. And just like that, he accepted the inevitable. He probably wasn't going to see her ever again. The next day arrived, but the blizzard hadn't let up. Not even a little. In fact, it had only grown stronger, practically freezing the entire country's infrastructure in place. Stepping outside had become a full-blown survival mission, and just breathing the icy air felt like a challenge. The morning news was filled with nothing but emergency weather reports. Within the next 24 hours, every region in the country was expected to experience even heavier snowfall and a brutal temperature drop. But it wasn't just happening here. Bizarre reports from overseas revealed that everywhere was getting hit. Dubai, Egypt, the Amazon basin, places that had no business dealing with snowstorms were now buried under thick blankets of white. Scientists, climate experts, and specialists from 46 countries were scrambling to the United Nations, desperate to figure out what in the world was happening. Despite all the chaos, every news channel kept repeating the same reassuring script. This severe cold snap wouldn't last too long. They urged the public to remain calm, avoid spreading rumors, and definitely not start panic buying supplies. Because, of course, the government totally had everything under control. Han Feng, cozy inside his fully decked-out home, couldn't help but click his tongue at the blatant lies. The government and media were feeding the public the same old scripted nonsense, doing whatever it took to keep people from freaking out. If he hadn't already died and come back to life, he might have believed them too. But this time, he knew better. And unlike the clueless masses, he was prepared. His supplies were fully stocked, his house was reinforced, and his heating system was running flawlessly. He had taken every precaution, planned for everything. For now, there was nothing to stress about. Then his phone started buzzing nonstop. The Happy Housing Complex's group chat was blowing up with messages. Everyone was freaking out about the crazy weather, talking about how the roads were already buried in snow and completely unusable. The residents, like the rest of the world, were utterly clueless about what was really happening. But then, amidst all the panic chatter, one message stood out. A user nicknamed Mysterious Person had suddenly taken center stage in the conversation. With eerie confidence, this mystery individual declared that this wasn't just a freak snowstorm. Something inside the Earth itself was causing this unnatural disaster. And then came the bombshell. This wasn't just bad weather. This was the beginning of the Ice Age apocalypse. Han Feng stared at the messages, his mind racing. Who was this mysterious person? And more importantly, how did they know about the apocalypse? Well, guess we'll only find out if you like and subscribe. Han Feng's brain instantly flags this random mysterious dude as someone shady, definitely the kind of bastard to keep an eye on. I mean, Han Feng is the main guy in this story. He's supposed to be the only one who knows about the incoming apocalypse, not some slimy mystery man showing up out of nowhere. Meanwhile, the once chill housing complex is turning into a pack of stinky boomers on a leash, tagging the property management to do something about the snowstorm wrecking their lives. Reading the same dry-ass messages over and over gets boring fast, so the group chat turns into a circus with everyone showing up as cute little chibi cat avatars. But don't let the fluff fool you. These residents are pissed. Snow's blocking the exit, and if it piles up anymore, grocery runs are out of the question. They paid fat cash for this place, and now the service feels like straight-up bullshit. If management can't get their shit together, the residents want a word, or maybe even a refund. On the other side, the property management crew is panicking, spitting out non-stop apologies. But let's be real, those half-ass sorries aren't helping. People want action, not empty words. At this point, they feel scammed. Right in the middle of this snow-covered mess is our guy Han Feng, annoyed as hell watching these boomers waste their breath arguing. Like, what do they expect? That the complex owner is going to summon magic to clear the storm? Still, not everyone's gone brain dead. Jin Jae-yu, one of the few with common sense, points out that they should stop being chicks and help each other out instead. The blizzard's not something management can just wish away, so yelling at them is just more bullshit. But of course, the goofer squad in the lobby isn't having it. They start trashing Jin for defending the management. He tries to explain he's not simping for anyone, just being real. Arguing gets them nowhere. But nope, the crowd's too busy being scumbags. They demand the snow be cleared so they can get their grocery run in. Starving isn't on the to-do list. Jean keeps trying to talk sense into the angry mob, saying even if they clear the entrance, the streets outside are still a mess. Better plan? Walk. Clearing footpaths is way easier than roads. Makes sense, right? Han Feng, meanwhile, is wearing this sour-ass expression. He recognizes the guy preaching like some low-budget guru. Their history? Let's just say it ain't friendly. Then, out of nowhere, this no-nonsense dude drops into the chat like a BS detector. No sugarcoating. He tells them if they want to eat, they better go outside and start shoveling. Talking ain't gonna melt snow. Then he bounces. Another guy steps up, ready to hit the snow and get to work. This thug's got that don't F with me vibe, and Han Feng clearly knows him too. Slowly, the residents start joining in. Even the soft ones roll up their sleeves. It turns into a group effort. And then there's her. Hyona, the chick no one forgets. Han Feng can't believe someone like her actually volunteered. Turns out she didn't. It's just bait. She knows the simps will lose their shit if she so much as sneezes. She milks it hard and dumps all her work on them like the sneaky bitch she is. Han Feng logs off, face full of frustration. That chick always finds a way to piss him off. And now, she's texting him. Why? Because she knows this one-leg bastard still has a soft spot. She wants him to bring food supplies and sends him a bonus. Bare legs, thick thighs, barely anything on, aimed straight at his soul. He can't deny it. She gets a 10 out of 10 for the effort. Using thirst traps in a snowstorm? That's some next-level manipulation. But with his leg busted, chasing ass ain't an option. So he claps back with a reply cold enough to make her skin crawl. And yep, it works. She's pissed, probably wishing she could stomp his ass out right now. Here's a little throwback to the chaos so far. Day 3 since the blizzard started, and the temperature's already dropped below minus 20 degrees. And this is just the warm-up to the real shitstorm coming. For now, central heating's still working, internet's alive and kicking, so everyone's glued to their screens, clinging to that digital distraction. Just like every bored-ass Gen Z out there, Han Feng's been doom-scrolling through TikTok, watching those busted chicks flaunting it in short videos. But honestly, even that isn't doing it for him anymore. He's bored out of his damn mind, and it's only day 2 of this so-called apocalypse. That creeping loneliness is starting to hit hard. His broken leg isn't helping. It's a total buzzkill, keeping him trapped like a grounded simp. It'll be months before he's back on his feet. With nothing else to do, he dives back into the endless video void. That's when he stumbles onto something insane. Some news report about a dude with freakish healing powers. The guy apparently nosedived from the 15th floor, wrecked every organ, crushed his bones to pulp, and still started regenerating like some badass comic book character. The doctors are baffled. Seeing that, Han Feng's gears start turning. He remembers he's got a little something of his own. So he activates his familiar green energy glow over his hand and tries to heal his busted leg. But the second the light appears, it fizzles out like cheap fireworks. Nothing. Just some glowing-ass failure. He gives it another shot, but nope, that shit didn't work. Defeated, he flops back onto the couch, totally let down after getting his hopes up for a hot second. Hours pass, and the brain-dead scrolling finally knocks him out cold. Then the dream hits. He's rocking some caveman-style clothes, riding this massive goat like a boss. And not just one goat, but a whole damn squad of them flying through the sky, goat heads bouncing around behind him like some surreal parade. It's wild. But just when it feels like he's having fun, one of the goats slams on its brakes and sends him flying through the air. He crashes hard, injures his leg again. And then, some weird shit. A goat comes up and starts licking his wound. It's nasty, stinky, and just wrong on so many levels. Grossed out, he shoves the thing away, pissing off. Next thing he knows, the goat whips out this absurdly long-ass tongue, wraps it around his leg, and yanks it straight toward the sky. The part of his leg it touched starts to heal like magic. And boom. Han Feng jolts awake, drenched in sweat, heart racing, balls sweating. That freaky-ass dream shook him to the core. Then he notices something, his leg is glowing. That same green energy he tried earlier is back, and this time is doing its job. The pain's gone. Carefully, he unwraps the bandages and places his foot on the floor. Nothing. No pain at all. The green glow really worked, but only after he fell asleep. So now he's thinking, what if sleep activates the healing? There's only one way to find out. In true borderline goofer fashion, he grabs a sharp knife, hand trembling like a boomer on coffee. He's seriously about to test this theory by slicing himself. Just a small cut on his index finger. While Han Feng is busy testing out his new powers, let's flip back to the outside, where the angry mob of residents is finally doing something useful for once. Thanks to everyone busting their ass together, they managed to clear the snow piled up at the front gate. And honestly, big props to Jang for rallying the whole squad with his unity speech that got these simps off their lazy butts. Zhang throws some extra appreciation at an old dude who clearly worked the hardest out of all of them. The old man, being a humble boomer, gives the credit right back to the twins who'd been grinding nonstop next to him. Then there's our favorite girl, Nurse Jean Jian, slipping and sliding like a helpless chick on the snow. The twins spot her struggling like a lost chicken and quickly rush in to pull her up. After that, they dip back to work, telling her to holler if she needs help again. Zhang notices the snow's coming down harder now, so he tells everyone to grab their groceries quick and get back before things get worse. Speaking of supplies, the old man suddenly remembers something, but it sounded like bullshit to him at first, so he hadn't mentioned it. Zhang insists he spill it. Apparently, a few days ago, someone saw a dude moving in with a small truck. Nothing weird at first. Jean brushes it off like it's standard stuff. But the old man adds a weird-ass detail. The guy brought in gas tanks and a damn fireplace. Now, that's not just moving in. That's doomsday prepper behavior. It looked like this bastard was getting ready to survive winter solo. Before they can dive deeper into this scummy mystery, the twins return with a quick progress update. Then, out of nowhere, this curious goofer shows up, clearly eavesdropping and dying to know more about the mystery prepper. But his nosy ass gets a cold surprise. A snowball to the face from Lu Yen, who's done with people slacking off. Zhang quickly steps in to kill the drama and tells the crew to move out now that the main path is finally clear. Nurse Jean is all hyped up for a shopping trip like it's some winter wonderland. Meanwhile, the old guy pulls Zhang aside, asking if he thinks that new scumbag neighbor knew about the storm ahead of time. Zhang pauses, dodging the question like a slick bastard. He just says the storm will pass soon, so no biggie. And even if it doesn't, at least they've got a neighbor with enough supplies to maybe save all their stinky asses. So technically, it's a win. As they push forward toward the store, the snowstorm keeps getting nastier, forcing everyone to pick up the pace and hustle. Meanwhile, our lazy-ass boy Han Feng was still passed out in his comfy little apartment, enjoying a solid nap, until someone banged on the door and ruined it. A familiar voice called out, and when he opened it, guess who it was? Good ol' Homeless Joe, showing up with the good stuff Han Feng had asked for. This was the promised treat from Boss Liu, and Brother Li had brought it over since he'd been smart enough to stockpile supplies earlier. Unlike the rest of the poor simps running around the city like chickens with their heads cut off, he didn't have to scavenge like a crazy bastard. Even though it was brutal outside, Han Feng appreciated the hell out of Brother Li for showing up. But the visit wasn't just about dropping off goodies. Li also brought some spicy gossip. Word was already going around about something wild that went down last night. Apparently, someone had wiped out an entire supermarket in the Eastern District. When Boss Liu's gang cleared a path through the snow yesterday and reached the store, they found nothing, just empty shelves. Like completely cleaned out. Han Feng found that shit hard to believe. A whole-ass supermarket emptied overnight? What kind of devil pulls that off? But Brother Li wasn't joking. This really happened. And that's when it hit Han Feng. Some weird crap was going down in this timeline, way weirder than his past life. Maybe he wasn't the only one who got superpowers. Just as his thoughts were spiraling, Brother Li cut in again, told him to bundle up and stay sharp. Then he dipped, leaving Han Feng alone to figure things out. He sat down, thinking hard about what the hell happened last night. Seriously, who the hell could rob a whole supermarket overnight? The only theory that made sense was something out of those cheesy comic books. A dude with power strong enough to stash unlimited supplies in some kind of pocket dimension. But that question didn't seem too far-fetched now. If Han Feng had powers, why couldn't some other joker out there have him too? That thought didn't sit right with him. He couldn't slack off anymore. He had to fully understand his own powers if he ever wanted a shot at surviving against other powered freaks. He needed a plan. He had to know exactly what he could and couldn't do. So, he grabbed his trusty diary and started sorting through what he already knew. His powers could interact with food, both plant and animal, and make it grow or multiply. Hell, it could even fry stuff, though the taste was complete garbage. But of course, there were limits. The success rate? Kinda shit. Each item reacted differently. Like soybeans had a 10% chance of turning into a plant. Meat? Even worse. Han Feng couldn't figure out what the slimy logic behind all this was. Then out of nowhere, a soybean in his hand exploded into a nasty green puff. And instead of sprout, he got a damn rock. A stinky one at that. This bullshit failure rate was driving him nuts. But he wasn't some quitter goofer. He was gonna crack this system. So, he buckled down and trained like a maniac the entire day. No breaks, no whining. Just grind. By evening, the bastard finally pulled it off. He held a legit soybean plant with pods, alive and fresh. Took a hell of a sweat bath to get there. Dude was basically a human radiator by then, but it was worth it. Through trial and error, he figured out a few golden rules. Turns out, the green energy he used wasn't consistent. Each item needed it for a specific amount of time, based on its nutritional value. Get the timing wrong, and boom, burnt stinky stone again. Basically, it was all about nailing the sweet spot, the perfect interval. 1 second too long or too short, and you get Jack's hit. This whole thing reminded him of an old rhythm game from a decade ago. You had to hit the right keys in time with the beat. In the same way, the power needed to flow in sync. Maybe up, down, left, right weren't just directions, but energy cues, and if you nailed the pattern just right, you'd hit the critical point and win. Do it right, and every boring soybean becomes a plant. Mess up, and you're left with a rock. After nailing it with plants, Han Feng figured it was time to mess with meat, obviously. But meat wasn't like your leafy green bullshit. One wrong move, and the stuff turned into a stinky black sludge that looked like a demon's puke. Still, the basics were supposed to be the same. First step? Figure out how much energy the meat needed. Everything seemed to be going fine, until the damn chicken leg blew up, just like all the other ones, splattering foul black goo everywhere. It was clear this wasn't going to be a walk in the park. Meat was a whole different level of crazy compared to plants. Attempt after attempt, boom. Another chicken leg turned into biohazard soup. The bastard meat just wouldn't cooperate. Han Feng kept going like a stubborn ass, but after the 10th explosion, he finally snapped. Dude cursed the hell out of the system like it was some slimy scumbag designed to mess with his brain. He even let out a pathetic little cry, like some goofer who'd hit rock bottom. But giving up? Not his style. Outside, the snowstorm turned into full devil mode, freezing everything in sight. But Han Feng? Still grinding in the kitchen like a man possessed. The place looked like a war zone with all the failed experiments lying around. Then came the final boss, the last chicken leg. At this point, Han Feng wasn't even thinking straight. He looked dead inside, just going through the motions, hitting the buttons like a chick playing a cracked-out rhythm game. Red energy, green energy, up, down, restart. One tiny mistake, and boom, back to square one. But this time, something clicked. The whole thing felt like a messed-up arcade level, but somehow, against all odds, he pulled it off. The chicken leg didn't explode, it grew. Like supersized mutant chicken mode. Han Feng let out a tired snort, dropped to the floor like a broken boomer, and muttered that it was worth a shitstorm. Finally, he figured out how to synthesize meat. The weather outside was turning nastier with each passing day. The news had just declared July 17th as the third straight day of a nationwide snow disaster. Every damn corner of the country was getting slammed, like the whole damn planet had hit reset with some once-in-a-few-thousand-years catastrophe. Authorities were busy acting like they had it under control, talking big about measures to protect basic living conditions. Typical boomer response. That's the kind of headline Han Feng woke up to. Again, he lost count how many times they'd peddled this same tired bullshit. Warning after warning, promises that the snowstorm had knocked out transportation, power, and internet. But hey, just hold tight. Everything will be fixed soon. And as always, they said humanitarian aid was on its way. Right? Classic government sweet talk. The anchor's final gem of wisdom. Don't step outside unless you want to freeze your ass off. But none of this fazed Han Feng. He'd heard all this crap in his past life already. Nothing new. Suddenly, his phone blew up with notifications. One after another. The residents' group chat was lit again, and as annoying as it was, Han Feng couldn't help but peek into the chaos. People were going wild, yelling over the morning broadcast. Some still had hope the rescue teams would show up. Others were over that fantasy and were already planning to save their own asses. But one avatar stood out in the flood of simps and clueless boomers. Uncle Lou. Old bastard didn't buy a single word from the news. Said if the government really had this under control, the rescue teams would have shown up ages ago. Instead, he'd heard whispers from his war vet buddies. Rumors that the government was piling up tanks, armored trucks, and other heavy gear in City A, the country's capital. They were prepping not for rescue, but for war. That one word, war, froze the entire chat. For a few seconds, nobody had the guts to say a damn thing. Then all exploded. People panicking, throwing questions at Uncle Lou like scared chickens. Was it true? If it was, they were already screwed. Han Feng, meanwhile, was kind of intrigued. He remembered hearing about this stage of the chaos in his past life. It was actually happening. Then came Zhang, crashing in like some wannabe hero trying to calm a goofer crowd. He didn't deny what Uncle Lou said. Instead, he got dead serious. If war really was about to hit, then survival prep needed to start now. Some neighbors were already out of supplies, and there was no saying when or if government aid would come. He laid out a bold idea. Anyone who had enough supplies should step up and share. To lead by example, he promised to donate half his own stash. A few residents started whispering, unsure what to make of this boomer energy. But one guy stepped up and backed Zhang, saying everyone needed to pitch in if they wanted to make it through alive. Then things got spicy. That joker Wu Quan Yu dragged La Hyona into it. Yeah, that stinky chick who once turned him down. Clearly, the bastard wanted to humiliate her in front of everyone. Hyona, not wanting to look like a bitch, turned on her innocent girl mode and gave a sad little apology, claiming she didn't have anything left to spare. Of course, her army of simps jumped in to protect their queen bee, throwing shade at anyone who dared question her. That mess nearly derailed the whole donation plan. People couldn't even come together for a damn crisis without drama. Still, supplies slowly started rolling in. Maybe Jiang's emotional speech actually hit some nerves. People donated food, clothes, medicine, all the essentials. Jiang thanked everyone for stepping up. Since there were too many folks to manage alone, he suggested forming a temporary emergency committee to organize everything. Naturally, he placed himself in charge, classic scumbag move. This team would be responsible for managing and distributing all the donated goods. Han Feng, reading that announcement, let out a smirk. Deja vu. He'd seen this bullshit play out before. And just like last time, this whole committee was nothing more than a greedy little setup, an excuse to hoard everyone else's supplies under the guise of leadership. It was July 19th, day 5 of the goddamn apocalypse, and the outside world had turned into a frozen hell, with the temperature crashing down to minus 40 degrees. This was also the day the building's central heating finally gave up the ghost, crushed by the brutal frost. People were losing their shit, scrambling for any way to keep warm without their precious heaters. A few of them managed to light some weak-ass fires in their apartments, just barely enough to survive. It was playing out exactly like last time, awful now, and about to get a whole lot worse. But of course, Han Feng, our main bastard, was the exception. Dude was chilling with his stockpile of failed charcoal experiments, which turned out to be perfect for firing up his fireplace. On the table, a cold-ass cola and a sweet-ass slice of strawberry cake. While the rest of the world froze their asses off, Han Feng was doing what any sane devil would, kicking back with single-player video games, not giving a rat's ass about what was happening outside. That peace, though, yeah, it didn't last. His game session got interrupted by a dumbass phone call. Still sipping his Coke, he picked it up. On the line was the person handling Block 8, yapping about needing manpower down in the basement parking lot to help clear the road in 20 minutes. Han Feng wanted to tell the guy to go eat shit, but whatever. He held back. These boomers still hadn't figured out the snow wasn't going anywhere. Against his better judgment, Han Feng dragged his ass out of his cozy little den and headed down to the lobby. Falling out with the neighbors could be risky, and he sure as hell didn't want anyone sniffing around and finding out his secrets. One look at the gate, and it was clear they were all screwed. Snow had them trapped inside like chickens in a cage. The volunteers who'd cleared the paths earlier were now raging, realizing all their hard work had been wiped out by this new record-breaking wall of snow. They figured they might as well try opening the door. When they spotted Han Feng, they roped him in two. Together, everyone threw their weight into it. On the count of 3, they shoved, and bam, the entrance flung open. What followed was a tidal wave of snow crashing in, dragging the lobby straight into a frozen nightmare. The storm outside was a full-blown monster. Just standing near the entrance felt like stepping into death's freezer. Hell, just trying to open your eyes in that chaos could leave you half-blind. Han Feng instantly regretted leaving his warm couch to deal with this bullshit. That level of cold? Straight up deadly. Thankfully, the rest of the group finally woke up and realized that walking into that blizzard would be straight-up suicide. Only a crazy bastard would try that. And speaking of crazy bastards, guess who showed up? That voice Han Feng hated was back. Homeless Joe, aka Brother Lee, had arrived to bless the party with his clown energy. He started roasting everyone, calling them coward for not stepping up during hard times. The volunteers were shaking in their boots, begging this joker to chill the hell out. But Brother Lee was on another level. He finished his cigarette in one dramatic puff, like some anime wannabe, cracked his knuckles, and charged into the snow like a lunatic on a mission. The goofer started yelling like a maniac and straight up punching the snow, scattering it like some B-grade superhero. Dude even managed to dig a tunnel the size of his own damn body into the human height pile of snow. Then, silence. A few seconds later, all anyone could hear were muffled cries for help coming from under the snow. The simp had gotten himself buried. The others had to yank him out before he turned into an ice statue, his face already looking purple and stinky from being trapped in that death trap. After that circus act, even the dumbest scum among them realized venturing out was pure suicide. They slammed the gate shut for good. Han Feng rushed over to check if that reckless bastard was still breathing. Once he confirmed the fool was alive, he told everyone to head to the parking lot and look for the guy in charge of attendance. With a storm raging like a devil outside, it was clear they weren't solving shit with manpower anymore. Down in the building's underground car park, the vibe felt a little more chill, probably thanks to it being tucked away from the chaos above. Mr. Jiang, the unofficial boss of the place, was surrounded by owners like always. After getting the latest updates from the lobby, he agreed that the snow-clearing mission should take a break. From now on, the basement car park was also going to be the donation and collection zone. Han Feng stayed in the shadows, keeping things low-key. It was his first time seeing this bastard Jiang in person, the same guy who had kick-started that sketchy-ass committee everyone was simping over in the group chat. Mr. Jiang had that overly sweet, too smooth attitude, polite words, and fake-ass support that made people trust him. And that's exactly how he manipulated everyone like a true devil in disguise. He praised the flood of donations coming in from the owners, acting all humble about it, saying how thankful he was that people were helping those in need. The energy in the car park was all sunshine and rainbows. People were patting themselves on the back like they'd saved the world. That feel-good unity? Total illusion. Han Feng knew better. He knew the second this disaster dragged on long enough, these same fools would regret coughing up their resources like blind chickens. Meanwhile, Brother Li, still shaking like a slimy little goofer after pulling his stunt earlier, decided to head out and gave Han Feng a quick goodbye. As Han Feng scanned the place, someone caught his eye. It was that ditzy nurse from the hospital, the one from when he busted his leg. She was rocking a fluffy winter onesie, looking like a lost puppy while struggling to carry a mountain of boxes. Clumsy as ever, she tried to push through the group huddled around the committee, but obviously, that wasn't going smoothly. She bumped into a couple of boomers standing there, and if it weren't for Han Feng stepping in like a damn hero, she'd have face planted right onto the cold concrete. He caught her in the boxes just in time, asking if she was all right. The chick opened her eyes, all flustered, thanked him, and then it hit her. This was the same guy from the hospital. But wait, wasn't his leg supposed to be wrecked? Realizing he just pulled a stunt no injured guy should pull, Han Feng panicked a bit. He fumbled through an excuse, saying his recovery had always been freakishly fast since he was a kid. Not the most convincing explanation, especially with him stammering like a nervous scumbag. Lucky for him, Nurse Airhead was too dense to sense anything shady. She just called his recovery amazing. When he offered to carry her boxes, she refused at first, saying they were heavy. But our guy insisted like the stubborn bastard he was. After a bit of back and forth, she gave in and handed them over. The second he grabbed the boxes, though, he nearly dropped them. These things were stupidly heavy. Like, what the hell kind of supplies were in here? He asked, and she casually explained they were mostly medical supplies she was donating. She even admitted they might be a bit much to carry, and said she could handle it herself. But honestly, Han Feng was too caught up in her soft features and kindness to care. He'd carry a damn truck if it meant staying in her orbit. She claimed she was stronger than most guys, and kept telling him not to overdo it. When he asked if she'd always been this tough, she suddenly got guarded. So there was a reason behind it all, but didn't go into details. Her vague-ass answer had Han Feng's curiosity flaring, but she looked uncomfortable, even apologizing for mentioning it. Apparently, something weird had happened recently that she couldn't explain. Also, realized they'd been walking and chatting this whole time, but she still didn't know his name. Han Feng introduced himself politely. In return, the angel-faced nurse smiled and gave her name, Jinjian. That smile? It messed with him. Straight up left him speechless. If she smiled at him one more time, he'd turn into a simp right there. He was as close to winning her over until she asked what he did for a living. And just like that, he dropped the bomb. Told her he was unemployed. Talk about fumbling a baddie right at the finish line. My boy really blew it. But thanks to classic manhwa logic, a random impatient bastard just happened to pass by and accidentally knocked Nurse Jean off balance. Struggling not to fall flat on her ass, she ended up grabbing the closest thing for support, Han Feng. Unfortunately for him, that meant getting a face full of soft, squishy contact as her chest pressed right into his arm. And with zero riz to back him up, the dude just stood there like a stunned goofer, silently enjoying the moment. Nurse Jean quickly pulled away, apologizing out of embarrassment, while Han Feng mumbled something about it being no big deal. Honestly, this could have been a sweet first meeting, if it wasn't for Li Hyona showing up like some stinky-ass zombie dragged out of a freezer. The effects of hunger and cold were written all over her slimy face. And like the shameless parasite she is, the bitch immediately clung to Han Feng, pressing her own chest against his arm like she owned the guy. With that fake-ass curiosity, she slowly wrapped herself around him and asked about the pink-haired chick, pretending to be all innocent. Jean, feeling super awkward, snatched the box supplies out of Han Feng's hands and dipped. She clearly just wanted to log her donations and not get caught in some chicken drama. Try to shake off the cringe. Han Feng asked why Hyona was even here. But he kept looking at Jean, feeling annoyed that this whole mess ruined the vibe. The witch casually replied she was here to pick up supplies and acted like she was worried about him, blaming his lack of messages. Han Feng scratched his head, saying he was just about to text, but she called him a liar, pointing out how cozy he looked chatting with someone else. Then came the real deal. She asked if he had any food to spare, claimed she was running low, and was wondering if she could share his stash. Han Feng didn't blow up. Nah, the guy smirked and leaned into the simp role like a joker. He told her he didn't have much either, but maybe he could share, only with people who actually replied to his damn messages. Acting bold as hell, he slid his arm around her waist and asked if she'd be down to crash at his place for a few days. That sudden switch from simp to savage threw her off. She flinched and stepped back, giving one of those fake chick smiles. Hyona said they could just talk online instead. Well, he got rejection, loud and clear. Han Feng turned to walk away, not interested in chasing a bitch who treats him like backup. But desperate times make people crazy. She grabbed his arm before he could leave, told him to wait, and started her usual emotional blackmail routine. Said he'd changed a lot lately. Then she pulled out the puppy eyes and claimed she'd always been serious about him. Claimed she didn't want people thinking she was with him just for his money. Real Oscar-level scumbag move. Han Feng's cheeks flushed a bit, but luckily he snapped out of it fast. If he hadn't died once because of this two-faced devil, he might have bought that bullshit again. But not this time. Now, all he wanted to do was rip that fake-ass mask off her stinky face. The only thing bugging him was still not knowing who the hell the guy behind her really was. But thinking about it, why even bother hunting that scum down? All he had to do was play it like last time. Wait until she brought the bastard to him. This time, he wouldn't be the clueless chicken in the trap. They might have a steel bat, but he's packing a goddamn sniper rifle. With that in mind, he didn't want to push too hard. He laughed it off, saying he was just teasing her. The witch looked a bit ashamed, realizing she went full Oscar mode for what turned out to be a joke. Han Feng played it cool, said he'd wait for her message so he could drop off the supplies the next day. And with that, they baited each other goodbye. She even told him to hit her up if he ever needed anything. But as she walked out of the parking lot, an evil smirk crept onto her devilish face. Too bad for her. This time, Han Feng wasn't the one getting played. He was the one pulling the strings. And damn, he was enjoying every second of tormenting that bitch. 2 whole days went by, and Han Feng didn't bother hitting up the witch, which made Lee Hyona absolutely spam his phone with angry-ass texts demanding the promised supplies. Dude didn't even flinch, just let the rage pile up while he vibed with a sizzling steak and some fizzy soda. Nothing hits harder than munching good food while mentally flipping off the bitch who killed you in your last life. Figuring out how to cook meat that good? Straight up game changer. The icy hell outside just made it better. While the rest of the world was freezing their asses off, this guy was sweating in a bathrobe, living like a legend. And no, he hadn't been lazy. He'd been grinding, running back-to-back experiments that confirmed 2 major things. 1, he couldn't stretch meat endlessly. But 2, just like soybeans, meat could be duplicated infinitely. His setup had already cooked up pounds of it. Every batch of beans, half got replanted, half got eaten. Same system with steak. With that red-green light combo, a chunk of meat and some beans could give birth to a full-blown steak. And by milking that method on repeat, he'd basically unlocked infinite food. That was his reality now. Meanwhile, the outside world was still falling apart. Some TV stations kept pushing news on day 19 of the snowstorm. Yeah, still July, but now it was August 2nd, and even the freaking Maldives had dipped to minus 42 degrees Celsius. That whole Paradise Island? Completely iced over. The ocean itself was freezing visibly, like some apocalyptic nature documentary. Reports said the ice layer was already 55 centimeters thick, and similar chaos was going down in other supposed tropical zones. Han Feng sat back, watching the news on his massive-ass entertainment center, scoffing at the media sugarcoating the crisis. Reality was way darker. While he sipped his daily red wine like a rich villain, a sudden blast from outside hit different. He rushed to the window, yanked open the curtain, and boom, yet another building up in flames. That made 7 explosions in just a few days. Not even Han Feng had a clue what was causing them, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just some random freak accident. Military choppers were zipping across the sky non-stop, and if Han Feng didn't know what was going on, no one else did either. The city was in full panic mode. Survivors had basically set up camp in the basement car parks, trading scraps for food and essentials. But as always, when desperation hits, the scummy ones crawl out. Plenty of people were taking advantage, sparking constant fights. In the middle of that circus was Mr. Zhang, still playing the hero role, handing out supplies like he was some messiah. Today, Han Feng decided to step out and see the chaos firsthand. The second he left his cozy setup, the cold slapped him hard. Every single time he left his pad, he regretted it. The real reason he showed up? To get intel. If it wasn't for that, he'd ghost these people for good. But in his past run, he remembered a rebellion starting right here. And the spark? Probably this same shady basement crowd. They were still pretending to be saints, handing out goods instead of robbing people blind. To figure out the truth, Han Feng went full detective mode. The lines were long, and a bunch of households clearly weren't doing well. At the front, some pissed-off dude was whining about getting just 1 can and a sausage, even though he'd donated tons of supplies before. Mr. Zhang hit him with the classic, everyone gets the same excuse. The guy snapped, demanding his stuff back, But obviously the committee couldn't just return it in the middle of a crisis. Zhang played the think big picture card and promised to pay him back in cash later. But future promises don't feed families. The rest of the line turned on the guy fast. They clowned him, told him to stop being a whiny little simp and move on. The crowd fully mobbed up, dunking on the dude for being shameless, all while kissing up to the committee like sheep. Han Feng just watched it unfold, already knowing the truth. The people in charge weren't giving anything back, but acting all morally superior while robbing those who gave the most early on. That was just another flavor of shameless. And just when you thought the basement couldn't get any more cursed, in strolls the legend himself. Homeless Joe, a.k.a. Brother Lee, dragging in his frail, half-dead ass like a sickly ghost. Dude looked 10 times worse than the last time anyone saw him. Skinny, shaky, borderline starving. It had been a hot minute since the two brothers crossed paths, and while Brother Lee tried to play it cool, acting like things weren't that bad, his body was screaming otherwise. He was trembling, weak, barely standing, and freezing his bones off. Not because of some shy boy syndrome, but because life had straight up wrecked him. Turns out, the guy had been surviving off tap water, hoping it'd kill the hunger, because he'd already handed over most of his stash during the donation drive like some noble martyr. Problem was his supplies dried up way before the snowstorm did. And the committee's rations? Absolute trash, barely enough to keep a rat alive. If he'd known the weather would go full apocalypse mode, he would have kept his stash tighter than his wallet. Watching the dude spiral into misery, Han Feng figured he might as well throw the guy a bone. And by bone, that meant 4 packs of noodles and 2 sad sausages. But Han Feng didn't just give it for free. He whispered a little favor into the guy's ear, something simple in exchange. Brother Lee pulled back like he couldn't believe what he just heard, but deep down, he knew his little bro was finding a way to help without making it obvious. Guy got so emotional, he damn near cried and swore he'd never forget this act of kindness for the rest of his miserable life. With a dramatic grip on Han Feng's shoulder, he promised to get the job done, no questions asked. Food delivery could wait, though. Man needed something in his belly ASAP, so he went to line up for the committee rations. Meanwhile, Han Feng was feeling pretty smug about the deal. Just a few noodles and sausages and boom, he wouldn't have to drag himself down to this freezing pit again to collect info. Sure, he felt a tiny twinge of guilt, but that was nothing compared to the warm thought of lounging on his couch, gaming with snacks in hand, far from this icy hellhole. Everything would have been perfect if his peace wasn't shattered by a surprise cameo from yet another annoying face. Right after hearing his name, a hand came flying at his cheek, Lee Hyona's version of a friendly greeting. The slap hit like a truck, leaving Han Feng momentarily stunned. Before he could even reboot his brain, she was going off, eyes blazing, calling him a total failure for ghosting her when she was begging for food. She made damn sure the whole parking lot heard her meltdown. Han Feng just stood there, frozen like a crashed PC, still processing how the witch who literally murdered him in a past life just smacked the hell out of him in public. He hadn't even settled that cosmic grudge yet, and now she was out here, slapping him like Yoda writ. His rage was bubbling fast, because clearly, in her mind, he was still that pushover idiot from back then, someone easy to yell at and guilt-trip. She kept ranting, even calling him deaf and mute while demanding answers, not giving him a second to breathe. So Han Feng switched gears and pulled out his best Oscar-winning act. With a deep breath, cold air fogging up in front of him, he launched into a fake apology. He spun a wild tale about how his food got jacked, left it outside for 1 second to grab his keys, and poof, gone. Said he tried to find a thief, but no luck. Hyona looked like a damn addict at this point, eyes twitchy and desperate, asking if he still had anything left. He told her he had just enough to barely scrape by, maybe 1 meal a day if he rationed hard. And just like that, she flipped the switch, back to her sweet girl act, cheeks flushed, smiling like a Disney princess. But her next request? That's it. She actually suggested they both survive by eating 1 meal every 2 days, splitting a stash like it was some love story apocalypse collab. Han Feng couldn't believe how next-level shameless she was, saying selfish crap like that with a straight face. That took guts. In her mind, Han Feng was still just a backup battery, a tool to drain when needed. So he played along, acting like some loyal simp who'd happily go halvesies on survival. She even had the nerve to ask for the food right now, but he dodged that with a fake excuse, saying it'd be delivered tonight, just needed to do a bit of packing. She giggled, teased him a little, and wished him luck not catching the flu. Han Feng waved her off with a polite smile. already cooking up a delightfully petty scheme in that chaotic brain of his. By 8 p.m. sharp, Hyona was already getting all clingy, bugging Hanfeng nonstop for food. Chick was so desperate, she even dragged herself to the lobby outside his room by 9:30. Alone, freezing, straight up miserable. Meanwhile, Hanfeng was back at it again with his favorite pastime, baiting her with vague promises, then straight up ghosting her calls and texts like the petty bastard he was. The elevator? Completely busted, thanks to weeks of zero maintenance in that frozen dump. So if Hyona wanted to throw a fit in person, she had to take the sketchy-ass stairwell. No other option. Swallowing her pride like cold medicine, she pushed open that creepy door and started her climb. Halfway up, she was already beat. The cold wasn't just annoying, it was brutal. Her body kept shivering, and she was dragging herself step by step, dead-ass tired. Girl hadn't eaten properly in days, and every stair felt like it was kicking her soul. Honestly, props to her. Who the hell climbs more than 16 damn floors just to mooch off someone's food? To make shit worse, the emergency lights on the upper floors were out too, so her climb turned into some haunted house-level experience. Then came a creepy sound. Just as her nerves were shot, something black dropped from above, straight up aiming for her head. It was a plastic bag falling fast, and she couldn't even flinch. Too shocked, too cold, too done with life. The bag hit her with a loud-ass thud, and just like some bad sitcom timing, the emergency lights flickered back on. White dust exploded everywhere. Girl just got blasted with flour like a slapstick victim. Covered head to toe, she stood there like a stunned clown. And there stood Hanfeng, looking all innocent, claiming he had just woken up and rushed over with the supplies after seeing her texts. He said the bag fell accidentally when the lights turned off. Yeah, sure. Hyona wiped the flour and plastic off her head and coat, looking straight up nasty. That fake sweet vibe of hers? Cracked. Her real, crusty-ass personality peeked through like rot under makeup. Hanfeng was eating this up. He'd planned this whole crapshow like a true menace, and he wasn't even done yet. He pulled out another plastic bag and told her he'd packed the rest of his supplies. But one look inside, and it was pure garbage, literally. Moldy produce, expired junk, even some meat that looked like it had been resurrected from the underworld. Nasty. Acting like a clueless dope, Hanfeng scratched his head and said he worked hard to keep that mess in stock. Then switched gears like a pro, pretending to be offended and snatching the bag back, telling her to return it if she didn't want it. But no way she was letting go of that. Starving and panicked, Hyona snatched it right back and insisted she wanted it. Hanfeng stared at her, head to toe. That so-called goddess he used to chase now looked like a homeless crackhead begging outside a 7-Eleven in the dead of winter. She was legit digging through the moldy trash bag for anything edible. Then she snatched the half-full bag of flour like it was gold, not even caring she just got blasted by the same stuff. Without saying thanks or goodbye, she dipped. But Hanfeng wasn't bothered. Giving her his actual trash? Totally worth it. That moldy haul was enough to mess up her stomach for days. And with showers basically a no-go in that weather, she'd be stuck walking around with flour sticking to her skin and clothes like some cursed pastry. As Hanfeng happily made his way back home, a strange feeling crept up on him. He brushed it off, pretending not to notice, but something was definitely moving in the background. Staying alert, he acted normal and casually walked to his unit. After exiting the stairwell, he kept his pace steady like nothing was off. But there it was, a shadow following his footsteps. A few seconds in, it was clear that someone was tailing him, and, judging by the snow boots, it was definitely a person. Using the element of surprise, Hanfeng quickly hid behind a door and ambushed the stranger. He grabbed the person with force, tackling them to the ground. Just as he raised his fist, ready to strike whoever was spying on him, he paused, his aggression fading. Lying beneath him was a girl with messy hair, sleepy eyes, and thick glasses. The hell was happening? Hanfeng figured there could only be one reason for her to show up this late. She had been watching him. Wanting to figure out her motive, he questioned her, but got nothing. Just a blank stare through those oversized glasses. She clearly wasn't the talkative type. Frustrated, Hanfeng tried to pressure her by threatening to take off her coat right there in the freezing cold if she didn't speak up. Still, not a word. Tired of the silent treatment, he finally let her go, for now, but warned her silently that next time, she might not be so lucky. If she was spying on him, she'd better cut the act and hurry home before she froze out here. Just as he turned to leave, he felt a tug on his sleeve. She wasn't letting him go so easily. Hanfeng didn't know what the hell she wanted, and she still wasn't saying anything. He told her to stop staring and leave unless she had something to say. But instead of speaking, she pointed at something and pulled him along. Even Han Feng, who wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, realized she was trying to show him something. She led him to her room. It was shockingly warm and well-lit inside. Han Feng stood there, speechless, taking in the sight. Boxes and boxes of supplies were stacked all around, some empty, some full. The place was messy, sure, but the fact that she had so much stuff this far into the apocalypse was insane. Had she prepared for this in advance? He asked her directly. Did she know the ice apocalypse was coming? For the first time, she spoke. What she said was weird, but it made sense in its own way. She had done her own calculations and predicted the coming of an ice age. Turns out, she was the one who had been posting warnings about the ice apocalypse in the community chat long before it started. Han Feng, of course, didn't fully get it. For someone like him, the idea that you could figure out the future through research and math, not reincarnation or rebirth, was hard to grasp. Still, he sensed that her real reason for dragging him here wasn't to explain her theories. And he was right. She had a bunch of screens set up in her room, all showing CCTV footage, and every single one featured Han Feng. In one clip, he was picking his nose while carrying boxes in the elevator. In another, a delivery guy brought a bunch of gas cans to his room. In a third, Brother Lee handed him a gun case. All of it pointed to one thing. She had been spying on him for a while. Now that they were in her comfort zone, she seemed completely unbothered and even started changing clothes right in front of him, claiming it was too hot in the room for winter wear. Han Feng, completely missing the point, asked why she was undressing in front of him like that. She replied flatly, it was hot, but he wasn't buying it and demanded she put her pants back on. Eventually, even he had to take off his coat. The room was just that warm. But deep down, he knew he couldn't just walk out yet. She knew too much. Until he sorted this out, he had to stay. Piecing everything together, Han Feng realized she'd been watching him not to blackmail him, but because his stockpiling raised suspicions. She wanted to know if he was smart and resourceful enough to team up. She wasn't great at talking, so she figured it was easier to show him what she meant. And she did, in the most confusing way possible. Just when Han Feng thought she was about to do something weird, she pulled out a generator from under her bed. That's all it was. She wasn't trying anything shady. She just wanted him to teach her how to use it. She was a genius when it came to computers and books, but when it came to basic survival skills, she was completely clueless. Eventually, the generator kicked on and was running smooth, though let's not talk about how running one indoors is straight up a dumb idea. Let's just pretend it was some fancy hydrogen-powered, whisper-quiet machine. Han Feng figured this would finally shut down her never-ending list of requests. Nope. Her wide blue eyes were already hinting at the next help me moment. This time, it was the hot water boiler. He hooked it up fast, and now she had hot water on tap, 24/7, powered straight from that generator. Still, he told her to chill on the water usage, and, for the love of sanity, remember to turn the damn tap off. Next up, the fridge. Absolute disaster. Looked like a health hazard and smelled like one too. Han Feng had to drop some basic survival wisdom. Raw meat goes in the freezer, not just chilling in the fridge like it's no big deal. Otherwise, it'll rot in no time. He also warned her to keep it clean unless she wanted to get sick. And nope, he wasn't about to turn into her maid. She had to start doing this stuff herself. Han Feng legit couldn't figure out how she even made it this far in life without knowing the basics. He even had to walk her through how to change and hook up gas cans for the stove, step by step, making her copy every move and remember all the safety stuff. But it didn't stop there. Soon enough, he was showing her how to cook and grill food over an open flame. By the time they wrapped it up, dude was straight up dead tired, but the food? Shockingly good. He told her to eat it while it was hot, then sat back, wondering how his life turned into this 24/7 babysitting gig for a grown-ass child. Her self-care game was trash, and the wild part? She didn't even look embarrassed. Dinner slapped, no doubt. But when Han Feng made a half-joke about the whole day, he awkwardly brushed it off like it wasn't that deep. Truth is, he was absolutely wiped and could only think of crashing into his warm bed. Turns out he wasn't the only one drained. When he looked over, she was already knocked out cold, head on the table, mid-meal, like it was the comfiest bed she'd ever known. First time in his life, he'd seen someone pass out while eating. Still, he scooped her up and carried her to bed, low-key baffled at how he'd just spent the entire day tutoring a clueless rookie. Later that night, the snow came down harder and the cold was getting real nasty. Han Feng had barely opened his eyes when more chaos knocked. Yep, her again. This time, she showed up with gifts to thank him, and even Han Feng was kind of shook at how much stuff she brought. But after he took the boxes, She just stood there like she wasn't leaving anytime soon. He knew that look. It screamed another favor incoming. She brought a generator and wanted help again because, clearly, everything he taught her the day before had flown right out of her head. So Han Feng had to start from scratch, like a damn tutorial NPC stuck in a loop. After a few days of this back and forth, Han Feng realized she was totally useless when it came to survival. Zero common sense, no clue about boundaries, just vibing in her own world. But credit where it's due, she didn't quit. Every single day, she dragged Han Feng back to her place to get lessons on survival and basic life skills. Eventually, she managed to cook something halfway decent. And compared to her earlier disaster meals, which even stray dogs would have walked away from, it was practically gourmet. In an ice apocalypse, people would probably fight over food like that. After all that, Han Feng finally decided to ask her name. She introduced herself by name Jo Shingon. Still didn't explain why she talked so weird or acted like a complete oddball, but Han Feng had already made up his mind. He wasn't about to ditch her, no matter how much of a train wreck she was. Meanwhile, down in the basement where the aid was being handed out to the broke-ass residents, shit was anything but chill. People were going full savage mode over the last scraps of supplies. Hunger had him snapping, turning the place into a brawl pit where everyone started snatching stuff from each other. Nobody gave a damn whose it was. Proof didn't exist anymore. The weak, they dropped like flies, too drained to even stand. The strong? They hoarded whatever they could grab, as if the apocalypse was a damn shopping spree. Yeah, those peaceful days in this community? Gone. What used to be neighbors were now fighting tooth and nail for whatever crumbs they thought they deserved. They clutched their looted trash like it was gold, and anyone dumb enough to try and swipe it got jumped instantly. People were throwing punches, kicking each other like rabid animals, till their fists were bruised and shoes soaked in blood. It was a whole damn war zone, and every punch was another crack in the crumbling wall of what used to be society. But in the middle of all that chaos, Mr. Jiang stood calm as ever, like a boss watching everyone lose their minds. Then he cranked the volume on his megaphone and straight up nuked their ears with feedback so loud, the crowd winced in pain. Man pulled a sonic attack like some low-budget supervillain. The noise slapped so hard it actually shut everyone up. When the screech finally stopped, Mr. Jiang took center stage and dropped the real talk. He lifted a dude who'd just gotten beat to hell and pointed out how they were all risking death over a few crusty supplies. Kinda pathetic, not gonna lie. But the crowd? Still salty. After all, this was the same guy who came up with the donation system that had them surviving on a sad pack of instant noodles every few days. If the fist didn't kill them, starvation probably would. Jiang acted like he was listening to all their whining about supply shortages, but then flipped the script. If they were going to throw hands over nonsense, maybe they actually deserved to starve. He turned it back on them and asked who really caused this shit show in the first place. And just like that, he tossed a piece of bread into the mix. Yeah, bread, and started spinning the real story. That same loaf used to go for a couple bucks, but now, the rich bastards were selling it for tens, even hundreds. The elites had cashed in hard, milking the desperate like a side hustle. They were slicing bread into 10 damn pieces and auctioning it off like it was art, all while sitting on mountains of supplies they refused to share. Meanwhile, the broke folk stuck in the basement had nothing left. No money, no stash, just vibes and violence. And yet, instead of turning on the fat cats, hoarding it all, they were eating each other alive down here. Mr. Jiang laid it bare. The ones with full cupboards were the same assholes who cranked prices sky high. They did it on purpose, pure greed. And the poor? They were the ones bleeding, starving, dying for what? Did that sound fair? Hell no. Now that the crowd was hanging on his every word, Jiang lit the final spark. He told them to cut the bullshit and unite. Take back what was rightfully theirs. And just like that, the gears started turning. The people began to really think about it. Why the hell were the rich chilling while they were catching beatdowns for expired noodles? Why were they the only ones suffering? Mr. Jiang saw the fire he'd just lit and watched with a smug little smirk as the whole vibe shifted. That planted seed of rage was blooming fast. The blame slowly shifted, aimed not at each other, but the rest of the building, the upper-level residents who'd been hiding behind locked doors and fat supply stacks. The basement crew wasn't just mad anymore. They were ready to throw down, convinced they were owed everything. As violence, tension, and that hungry mob mentality kept bubbling, one guy wasn't fooled. Homeless Joe, a.k.a. Brother Lee, stood out in the crowd. He saw through all of Jiang's manipulative crap like glass. Everyone else had lost it, running wild in a frenzy, but he knew something big was about to explode. And he had to get word to Han Feng before things really hit the fan. Back in Han Feng's room, the guy was just chilling, fake reading a book while Loki's snoring like a grandpa. That lazy vibe shattered the moment his phone buzzed. Brother Lee's texts hit hard. Shit was going sideways in the basement parking lot. Thanks to Mr. Jang stirring up chaos like some discount cult leader, people had completely lost their minds. Now, they were roaming the halls like scavengers, going door to door, cracking locks, ready to jack supplies from anyone with a stash. And they weren't just bluffing. They were strapped and more than ready to throw hands. Brother Lee told Han Feng to stay the hell out of it, to not go full hero mode and get himself wrecked. Han Feng could only hope homeless Joe out there was holding it together somehow. None of this was how he imagined things would spiral. Yeah, he had grabbed 2 guns just in case, but the idea of actually pulling the trigger on another person? That shit messed with his head a little. And if this raiding crew ever caught wind of his stockpile? Oh, they'd go absolutely feral. Tear through his room like hyenas, leave nothing but dust and bones. Dude needed to prep for all-out war. He ran to his stash and pulled out wires, some tools, and a couple fire extinguishers. MacGyver mode activated. He started rigging his door with a nasty little trap, slapping live wires onto the doorknob like it was Home Alone, Apocalypse Edition. Once he finished the setup, he started laying out the wires on the floor, nice and slow. But his mad scientist routine got cut short. Boom, power outage. Everything just died. From the windows, he saw it wasn't just his unit. Entire buildings were blacked out, top to bottom. Some folks tried calling building management, but that was a joke. Those people ghosted ages ago. Han Feng figured this was coming anyway. The snowstorm was going berserk, and everyone was overloading power to stay warm, so a total blackout was inevitable. Snow had piled up so bad, and the temps outside were stupid cold. No one was fixing anything in this weather. With the power and signal both out, this wasn't just a temporary hiccup, it felt like a permanent, we're screwed kind of vibe. And once the rest of the people realized the lights weren't coming back, it'd be full chaos. Panic would snowball into full-blown riots, and that's when real hell would break loose. Now rewind a bit. 30 minutes before the blackout, Lee Hyona was busy wolfing down a mountain of noodles like a starving beast. Her new sugar daddy was on a bragging spree, flexing about how he bought up supplies at 50x market price. And guess what? The desperate folks still caved and sold him everything. He only dropped $500,000 to hoard a king's ransom of goods. Then this bastard took it up a notch, started auctioning supplies, making the poor scrap like animals for crumbs. The tactic worked. Blondie stacked a fat pile of cash. Feeling cocky, he stroked Lee Hyona's face and acted like she was some trophy chick he'd bought with loot. She gave him that fake smile, all sweet and agreeable. And yeah, he was already plotting what to do with her like he owned the place, like his fat wallet could buy anything, even her obedience. But the mood got nuked when frantic footsteps echoed down the hallway. The basement raiders had arrived. Tools in hand, doors in their sights. They weren't just here to mess around. They were hunting him. Word spread in the group chats that Blondie was the reason prices skyrocketed. He was the prime target. Now, they were pounding on his door, kicking it like maniacs, trying to break in and tear him apart. And Blondie? All that smug energy? Gone. He stood frozen, brain short-circuiting, while the door rattled under the weight of real rage. Turns out, money wasn't going to save his ass tonight. Mr. Jang's psycho squad had gone fully unhinged, and they weren't stopping. The snowstorm outside was still going full psycho mode, not even hinting at slowing down. Inside Han Feng's little bunker, the place was turning into a total disaster zone. Wires, gear, and random junk scattered across the floor. He was neck-deep in building this janky, Home Alone-style trap for his front door, and naturally, it was a chaotic mess. Dude followed every step to set it up, but the energy readings were giving zero output. Just when he started wondering what the hell went wrong, a sloppy bundle of wires suddenly sparked, exploded, and burned out. Guess the line got hot right in that moment. Boom. Caught in the blast, Han Feng choked on the smoke while trying to recover, putting out the small fire on the wire. Still, he couldn't figure out what was messing things up. Setting up this trap shouldn't have been rocket science, but without the internet, everything became a nightmare. Right when he was still piecing it together, someone knocked on the door. And of course, the trap wasn't even ready yet. He stood up and cautiously peeked through the peephole. No face in sight, but the figure was short with wild hair sticking out. Yep, the same damn outcast girl. This chick really picked the worst timing, rolling up with a deadpan face, clearly needing help again, while Han Feng was knee-deep in trap duty. The whole scene instantly reminded him of the moment that sent him back in time, getting played by some witch and smacked around by a psycho. Just thinking about that made him freeze up. His grip on the door loosened. He didn't want to risk anything sketchy going down. So instead of opening up, he warned her from behind the door to bounce quick, claiming people were breaking in and looting supplies. She didn't move. She just stood there, looking all pitiful in the freezing hallway. Then the banging started, louder, more desperate. Even when he still didn't open the door, she just gave up and slumped to the floor, shivering her ass off near the entrance. Meanwhile, those looter voices started creeping up, getting closer to his floor. Didn't matter how many people were living on the 18th. These raider bastards were here to break down every damn door. Two rugged dudes strolled into the hallway, grinning like they'd won the apocalypse jackpot. Being the first ones up here, they split the rooms like candy. And just Hanfeng's luck, his room was the closest. One of them whipped out a crowbar, talking about delivering resources to check if anyone was home. Inside, Hanfeng had already yanked the girl in and slapped a hand over her mouth to keep things quiet. No noise from inside meant the thugs started working the crowbar. Hanfeng whispered to her not to freak out. Those punks weren't getting through his upgraded door. And he was right. The handle got flipped up and down a bunch of times, but the reinforced door wasn't budging. After getting nowhere, the thugs decided to mark his unit and move on to the next one. Thank God he got that door installed. 5 centimeters thick iron plates backing up the frame. Even the contractor who did the job was blown away. Hanfeng was feeling himself for that choice, so much that he totally forgot his hand was still over the girl's mouth. He didn't dare make a sound, but she gave a quiet thank you for not leaving her outside like an ice popsicle for those freaks to find. Just to be safe, they waited a few extra minutes until it was clear those raiders were gone. Soon as the coast was clear, Hanfeng dove right back into fixing the trap. He was dead set on making sure that anyone who tried touching his door next time would get straight up electrocuted. The girl watched curiously while he worked, and when he said it was his electrocution defense system, he threw in some sarcastic shade like she wouldn't get it anyway. But let's be real, he barely understood the setup himself. And so far, the whole project was one giant L. Turns out, she was actually cracked when it came to anti-theft systems and electricity stuff. Voltage, current, wiring, child's play to her. So she straight up coached him from the sidelines. Cut the power, wrap the bare wire around the handle, run the next wire from the circuit box, then switch the power back on. Boom! When he tested the handle, the current reading was sky high. Dude was stunned. When he asked how the hell she knew all this, she dropped something bizarre about the true eye of the evil king that could see through everything in the world. Anyway, now that his death trap was live, Hanfeng asked what she needed help with this time. She didn't even bother explaining. Just dumped her whole backpack's contents on the couch like it was her new crib, and then casually announced that the true Eye of the Evil King was officially moving in. Hanfeng's brain needed a second to catch up. The realization hit. This chick really planned to live here. He was totally against the idea, freaked out even. Told her to go back fast. But while tripping on the wire spaghetti all over the floor, he lost balance and face-planted hard. Mess everywhere. And then, on his palms, there was this glowing purple energy, all weird and humming with some strange power. Falling that hard should have hurt, but he barely felt anything. That's when he noticed what he landed on. His coffee table. Except it wasn't solid anymore. The thing had turned squishy, like clay or something moldable. Hanfeng just sat there, low-key stunned, realizing he somehow made the damn table go soft without even trying. Hanfeng finally caught on to the weird purple glow flickering around his hands, and instantly linked it to why the table felt like freaking foam. Even the toolbox and tools nearby had turned into bendy trash the second they touched that glow. He picked up a hammer, and the damn metal head just curled on itself like soft rubber. Waving it around made things worse. It kept losing shape like it was made of clay. In short, that purple light was turning stuff squishy for no reason. Outcast girl saw the whole thing go down, just standing there like a ghost. So damn silent, he forgot she even existed in the room and kept messing around with his new toy power like it was playtime. Meanwhile, she just watched him blankly, then lit up like a light bulb and slapped a random title on him. Said he was some emissary chosen by the true Eye of the Evil King or some dramatic nonsense. Hanfeng figured it was easier to just roll with it than explain whatever was actually happening. Her logic was so out of pocket, maybe pretending to be this evil king's chosen would buy him some peace. Next thing, she's proposing they work together. As in, they share his damn apartment like it's now headquarters for this imaginary evil king. And before he could even shut that down, the chick was already making herself at home in one of the rooms like she owned the place. He hadn't said yes, but whatever. He let her do her thing. Right now, the real issue was figuring out what the hell that purple light actually was. From a glance, it looked like it just made things soft, which meant, holy shit, maybe he had more powers than just those two lights from before. Maybe a whole collection waiting to be unlocked. The moment that kicked this off was when he tripped over some random cables and nearly face-planted into the table, which had turned into a damn sponge. So, Hanfeng focused on that feeling, replayed it in his head, and boom, purple glow back again. Looked like he was getting the hang of this power-calling business now. He tested it first on those same dumb cables that triggered the whole thing, then got bold and tried on a kitchen knife. As soon as the purple aura hit the blade, the metal basically melted. No resistance, just full-on jelly mode. Dude was straight up stunned. Steel had gone squish. The knife was so soft now, it just wrapped around his fingers like silly putty. He went full mad scientist after that, testing this weird-ass softening touch on every damn object he could find around the apartment. Turns out, every household item got squishier the longer the purple light hit it. No extra side effects, just softness. Honestly, the ability was low-key useless by itself, until a light bulb went off in his head. What if he mixed lights? He already knew the green one from before. So what if he fused it with this new purple one and slammed them both on something softened? Didn't take long to master the combo. He grabbed that floppy kitchen knife again, now looking like a half-melted joke, and coated it in both purple and green light. For dramatic flair, he yelled Bankai like he was in some anime, and the wild part? It actually worked. The jello knife turned solid again, sharp as hell, and tough enough to slice clean. It even had a polished shine, like he could use it as a freaking mirror. He scanned the place and spotted a box of tissues. Just to push it further, he tried the same move on one thin-ass piece of tissue. After applying the combo lights, he tried bending it out of shape, and it fought back. The thing was solid, almost unbreakable, which meant that combining purple and green didn't just fix stuff, it upgraded the toughness like crazy. And that's when it hit him. This whole trick wasn't just flashy. It had some real, practical, game-breaking uses. Meanwhile, the raider punks who had jacked other people's supplies were starting to show their selfish-ass colors. They flat-out refused to share the stolen stash, hoarding it for themselves out of fear they'd run dry. They whined about not wanting to split their so-called hard-earned haul with women and the elderly. But they had to keep it under wraps, or they'd be screwed hard if word got out. While they were busy plotting their slimy little scam, one of them noticed some freaky shit on the wall. To their disbelief, the wall on the 18th floor started wriggling like it was alive. When they shined a light on it, a face began pushing through the concrete, twisting and grimacing like it was trying to break free. These raiders might have been tough bastards when it came to robbing supplies, but this was some straight-up nightmare fuel. Then came the arms, stretching out like some ghostly apparition clawing its way out of the underworld. Lights out. It felt like full-blown paranormal activity playing out in front of them. Terrified, the raiders bolted down to the lower floor, too scared to deal with whatever cursed shit was happening above. Meanwhile, Hanfeng was inside that suffocating mess, barely able to breathe. Forcing his face through those soft, clay-like walls was hell. He knew he had to bust out before he ran out of oxygen. For testing, he picked one wall to try out his combined purple and green light powers. But coating an entire wall with that energy was brutal work. After straining himself, he finally forced massive amounts of light to merge together, giving him a wall tougher than anything he'd built before. To test it, he dragged out a sledgehammer. Standing before the reinforced wall, he raised it high, eyes locked with determined anticipation. Then he swung. The hammer smashed into the wall over and over, until his arms were screaming and the damn thing nearly slipped from his hands. But the pain was worth it. The wall was indestructible as hell. He couldn't even scratch it with his full strength. Back in the basement car park, most of the raiders came crawling back, surrendering a few scraps of their loot. One guy nervously scratched his head, apologizing for only snagging a tiny bit of food. While he was being checked, someone tapped him on the shoulder, and the man's nerves snapped. In the next second, the guy was slammed to the floor, arms locked behind his back. The one who pinned him was one of the Jean brothers, pressing down hard as he demanded to know where the rest of the stolen goods were. The raider denied everything, swearing up and down he hadn't hidden supplies. But Jean Bro had seen him lugging 3 big bags, and now he was coughing up just one puny sack. With his arms twisted and about to snap, he still kept denying it. Jean-bro was ready to beat the truth out of the lying bastard when someone stopped him with a casual tap on the shoulder. To everyone's surprise, it was none other than Mr. Jiang, the man of the people. Mr. Jiang calmly urged Jean-bro to let the raider go for now so they could talk it out. If there really was a problem, he wanted to handle it himself. Reluctantly, Jean-bro let go and shoved the trash down for Mr. Jiang's sake. Looking up, the raider saw a hand stretched toward him, the representative of the basement car park, the benevolent Mr. Jiang. His kind smile eased the crowd, but beneath that smile was something sharp and calculating. After some minutes of smooth talk and coaxing, the thief finally gave in and revealed the rest of the food. Just as suspected, there were 2 big bags hidden away. Shamefaced, the man confessed he was greedy. 5 mouths to feed at home, and the rations just weren't enough. Hearing that, Mr. Jiang took his own share of food for the day and handed it over. He respected the rule that everyone had to turn in what they collected to receive fair rations, but he also showed understanding for people struggling to survive. That gesture nearly broke the thief down, tears ready to spill as he thanked Mr. Jiang from the bottom of his heart. Lao Wang, the lying bastard, swore that if Mr. Jiang ever needed anything, he'd be there. Turning back to the line of people waiting for rations, Mr. Jiang urged them to take their share and head home quickly. The Jean brothers were baffled at how he got the thief to cough up the stash so easily, and even gave him extra rations. But Mr. Jiang just shrugged it off, saying he only helped the man understand a principle. Of course, the brothers pressed to know what that principle was. Mr. Jiang explained that history was full of riots and uprisings sparked by clashes between social classes. These events were labeled collective social behavior. If you weren't caught in the act, you wouldn't be convicted in court. All he did was remind the raider that breaking the rules would make the collective cast him out, branding him nothing more than a common criminal. And once the disaster ended, he'd still have to deal with the law and the vengeance of the people he stole from. Those combined fears were enough to crack him. From afar, Uncle Lou quietly watched the whole scene play out. He knew damn well Mr. Jiang had left out one crucial truth, that within every riot or rebellion, there's always a leader driving the movement. Heroes rise in chaos, but so do villains. And in this troubled time, Uncle Lou could already see that spark of dangerous potential burning in Jiang. Han Feng was still in grind mode, swinging that beast of a sledgehammer across his house like a man possessed, making damn sure the place was unbreakable. It drained the hell out of him, but hey, he had invincible windows now. With the house reinforced and toughness check complete, he could finally breathe easy. Right then, someone started banging on his door again. This crap was happening way too often. He crept across the floor, half expecting it to be those resource-stealing neighbors. At the peephole, though, he froze. Standing there was Li Hyona, shivering in the cold, tears streaming, calling his name. The whole setup looked way too familiar. She spilled her heart out, saying only someone who truly loved her would stick around during hard times, and that if he just opened the door, she'd open her heart. Han Feng's brain flashed back to the night of his death, ambushed in his own damn room, played like a fool by this witch and her partner. And here she was, spitting out the exact same line she used back then. That could only mean one thing. Outside that door, some bastard was lurking, ready to cave his skull in if he took the bait. His first thought was sweet revenge, grab a gun and blow this dog couple straight to hell. But halfway there, he paused. With no electricity, he'd be the one at a disadvantage. If he missed the first shot, he was toast. Using an electric trap to shock them both at once was impossible too. So he shut off his generator, forcing himself to calm down. One chance, one move. That's all he had. The real threat wasn't the witch whining at the door. It was the creep hiding in the dark. Han Feng needed to locate him and deliver a fatal hit. He remembered how things went last time. The guy should be hiding in the blind spot behind the door. He gripped his sledgehammer tight, pressing his hand to the wall as purple sparks crawled across his palm. If this worked, he had a shot. Meanwhile, Hyona was still out there, acting like some damsel in distress, begging him to open up. The man she brought to kill and rob him was already having doubts, but she hyped him up, saying Han Feng had truckloads of supplies from before the disaster. Enough food to live off for days. Too bad they picked the wrong damn target. The wall behind the killers started to morph like wet clay, a sledgehammer-shaped protrusion pushing through. The guy finally caught the strange noise, but he was too late. A hammer smashed through the wall and obliterated his jaw, sending him flying like a rag doll. Hyona stumbled back, shocked. She barely got a word out before the supposedly unopenable door creaked open. Han Feng stepped out, fire extinguisher in hand, rocking a sly little grin. The witch's confidence shattered. Before she could act, he let the extinguisher spray rip, blasting her with that white powder as she shrieked. She tried to keep her soft, fake tone as she begged him to stop, but she choked on the stuff, coughing hard while her body trembled from the cold. Through the mist, she saw the rich blonde prick she dragged along twitching on the floor, convulsing and begging for help. But she wasn't in any state to save him either. Han Feng's hand cut through the fog, grabbing her by the hair and scarf. Fueled by adrenaline, she tore herself free, but lost a handful of hair in the process. Slippery bitch. She bolted, screaming for help. Han Feng clicked his tongue, annoying that she slipped away, but Blondie wasn't so lucky. The bastard was still struggling to stand. Fueled by rage, Han Feng drove a brutal kick into his gut. As he raised his foot to stomp the life out of him, Blondie whined, telling him to wait. The spoiled brat started name-dropping his daddy like it meant something, swearing bad things would happen if Han Feng touched him again. Han Feng's response was a brutal punch to the face, mocking him about what was coming next. He didn't give a single damn who this guy's daddy was. He was going to beat the living shit out of him. When threats failed, Blondie tried being polite, calling Han Feng bro and claiming they had no beef, so the beating wasn't fair. That just made Han Feng snap harder. Memories of his past life came rushing back, and he slammed Blondie's head into the ground again. Han Feng mounted him, fists raining down, every punch filled with years of bottled rage. This was the man who had treated his life like trash, killing him when he'd done nothing wrong. With blood soaking his gloves and fury in his eyes, Han Feng dared the bastard to say something. Blondie wanted to, but his broken jaw and busted mouth couldn't form a word. Han Feng stood and grabbed the spiked baseball bat lying nearby, the same weapon that ended his life and began this new one. Holding it over the helpless prick, he watched him cry and spit blood, demanding to know why he was being beaten like this. Han Feng's rage exploded. The man who killed him without reason now had the balls to ask for one. He raised the bat and brought it down hard, nails tearing through flesh and bone. The sickening crack of a skull echoed down the 18th floor, blood splattering everywhere. Revenge was his. He had finally killed the man who killed him. His heart was racing, adrenaline fading fast. When he looked at the carnage in front of him, his stomach twisted. The gore was so brutal he almost puked. Turning aside, just in time, he vomited onto the floor, the taste of bile mixing with the metallic stench of blood. Han Feng was trying hard to pull himself together when a familiar sound broke the silence. Outcast Girl was just sitting by the door, quietly messing around with the dead man's blood like it was paint. She had clearly seen the whole thing go down and casually offered to help him clean the mess. Together they handled the crime scene fast, and she didn't even flinch at all the gore. Han Feng couldn't shake the feeling that there was something seriously off about this girl, and letting her stay in his place felt like a bad F***ng idea, ***. He used the excuse that more criminals might come for revenge any second to convince her to go home before she got caught in the crossfire. But there she was, sipping orange juice like it was no big deal, unfazed by the threat of more intruders. Han Feng just wanted her gone for her own good, but she was stubborn as hell and refused to leave. He warned her the days ahead would be brutal and both of them could easily die. But she set her glass on the table like it was some kind of declaration and told him that the evil king's true, I would protect them. For now, though, she said that power was drained and she needed sleep. Han Feng had had enough of this edgy act. He grabbed her arm before she could lock herself away, demanding she quit brushing him off with wannabe dark nonsense and actually listen. They were about to deal with some serious shit. She just glanced at his grip on her shoulder, then looked up, told him to continue, and opened the room door. Han Feng, confused but curious, followed and peeked through the door. Whatever he saw on the other side hit him so hard it left him completely speechless. Meanwhile, down in the basement parking lot, life was crawling along. People were milling around, blocking the way, waiting on rations. Supplies were still running short, but the system worked enough to keep things mostly calm. Li Hyona, who had just broken free of Han Feng's grasp, lined up with the rest of the plebs to grab her share. With nowhere else to run and no one to cling to, she gave her name and apartment number and walked away with just a piece of bread. The witch was still stewing over last night. Her rich sugar daddy had collapsed out of nowhere and never came back, and the only explanation that made sense was Han Feng had planned a trap. That thought only fueled her curiosity about what he was hiding behind that door. Before the chaos, she had caught a glimpse of light and even felt a warm breeze slip out from inside. That meant he had a power source. Maybe he hadn't just stockpiled food. Maybe the bastard had been prepped for the entire snowstorm while she was left taking his scraps. She hated him for it. Bitter and pissed, she wanted nothing more than to sneak another look inside his place. Lost in her thoughts, she bumped into a man in line. He recognized her, and a flashlight beam flared in her face. With a big grin, the guy invited her over to Block 5's lobby, where survivors had lit a brazier for warmth. She brushed him off, saying she'd rather stay warm at home. The creep didn't quit, bragging about his food stash and how he had enough for two if she wanted to join him. He'd always had a thing for her type, and this was his chance to make a move. Lee Hyona might be a witch, but even she felt disgusted at his sleazy tone. When his bribes failed, the bastard started making a scene, accusing her of stealing resources for other households, which, annoyingly, was true. Survivors began paying attention. Furious, she smacked him across the face with the bread she had just hustled, shoving him out of the way. Humiliated, the creep raised his hand, ready to crack her with his flashlight. Before he could swing, Nurse Jean stepped in. She slapped him so hard it sent the bastard flying into a wall. The crowd, shocked by the sudden escalation, quickly decided to call their almighty Mr. Jang to sort things out. Lee Hyona, stunned by the nurse's raw strength, froze as the angelic woman handed her a name card and gently offered her a checkup in case she wasn't feeling well. Embarrassed and not wanting more eyes on her, Hyona thanked her and hurried off. But the creep wasn't done. He staggered back to his feet, charged at Nurse Jean, and slammed her to the ground, spitting insults and calling her a stinky hoe. Just as he raised his arm to beat on her, someone grabbed him from behind with brutal force. One swift motion later, the bastard was neutralized. It was none other than Brother Lee, our favorite gangster. Malnourished, lips cracked, barely holding himself together. But even in that state, Brother Lee had no tolerance for scumbags who dare to lay hands on women. Finally, Mr. Jang pulled up to shut down the chaos. The creep instantly started pointing his greasy fingers at Hyona, snitching about her faking resource claims and cozying up with a rich kid to jack up supply prices. Since the bastard clearly hadn't learned his lesson, Brother Lee was about to throw hands again, but before he could land a hit, Mr. Jang snatched the snitch by the collar and laid into him. He lectured the slimeball about how the committee's job was to protect the weak and make sure no one starved. In the end, the rat got off with just a stern warning. Mr. Jang then turned to Nurse Jean and Brother Lee, apologizing and inviting them to join the committee. Brother Lee didn't even think twice. He wasn't about to rob people under some fake-ass banner of justice. He'd rather starve than sell out his principles. Nurse Jean also turned it down, though she kept it polite, saying she couldn't accept the committee's forceful methods, but she'd happily help treat the sick. As the two started leaving the car park, Hyona swooped in and tried to shoot her shot. She clung to Mr. Jang's arm, trying to pull off some washed-up seduction act, using whatever cheap-ass feminine charms she still had left to leech onto someone with power. But Mr. Jang, being a total Sigma, shut her down quick. He made it clear the committee only takes people with actual useful skills. Brother Lee could fight, Nurse Jean could heal, but someone like Hyona? Deadweight. She had zero value in an apocalypse. Panicking, the witch racked her brain and blurted out that she knew a spot stacked with resources. Meanwhile, over in Han Feng's room, the dude was basically stuck in a guessing game with his new roommate. Outcast Girl had her hands in some kind of mini black hole, pulling random crap out one by one. Han Feng was trying to describe what he needed, but this girl literally pulled out a mannequin. That's when she explained her ability was dimensional storage. She could suck anything around her into the black hole. Putting stuff in was easy, but taking it back out? Her accuracy was absolute trash. Han Feng got curious about what was inside that freaky void. Outcast Girl had never even explored it herself. She just rummaged around with her hands. Han Feng, being bold as hell, decided to stick his head in. And no, don't call the cops, it's not what it sounds like. With half his body inside, he opened his eyes and saw a massive alternate dimension. An endless void jam-packed with floating supplies and random bullshit. Total chaos. It really was the stash of the superhuman who had cleaned out every supermarket in the East region overnight that hit him. His eyes started watering as he realized the black hole had zero oxygen. He yanked himself out, gasping like he'd just drowned, choking down air like a madman. Just a few seconds in that cursed subspace had nearly wrecked him, sucking the moisture right out of his body. He snapped at Outcast Girl, pissed she didn't bother to warn him about the whole no air thing. She didn't give a damn, just kept digging through her infinite stash like nothing happened. Finally, she pulled out what he'd been asking for, remote control toys. Boxes of drones and RC cars came spilling out of the black hole. Han Feng lit up instantly, all the near-death trauma forgotten the second he laid eyes on them. On the icy-ass stairs of floor 18, a bunch of raiders decided to try their luck robbing poor souls again. By now, this floor had built up a nasty rep, whispers about some monster lurking in the halls. Glass's raider wasn't buying that supernatural crap. Besides, Mr. Zhang himself sent them to scout, and nobody wanted to piss off the boss. Some were still side-eyeing the intel they got from that girl Li Hyona, but work's work and mouth gotta eat. Too bad for them. Han Feng and his shiny new toys were already watching. Lucky break, they had the monitoring system running just in time, ready to spring their plan. Han Feng was the trigger man. Light the fire, and Plan 2 goes live. He flicked a 2-minute timer on his stopwatch and slid out into the stairwell. The raiders froze the second they heard a faint, creepy sound ahead. Then boom, lights everywhere. The source wasn't some ghost, though. It was just a bunch of remote-controlled cars Han Feng had prepped. Raiders relaxed, thinking it was just toys rolling out. What they didn't notice was the explosives strapped underneath. Once the fuse burned down, mini blasts rocked the staircase, flashing blind and swallowing them in smoke. Non-lethal, sure, just lime explosives, but enough to leave them dazed and stumbling. Before they could regroup, a drone buzzed overhead, tail lit with another explosive. That was enough to make them scatter like cockroaches, retreating the way they came. Outrunning a flying drone, though, that's a joke. Outcast Girl was on the controls, piloting like a damn pro. Han Feng, though, was grinning wickedly, saying it was time to really teach these bastards a lesson. But while toying with them, the drone dipped too low, too close. One raider swung a crowbar, clipping a propeller. The toy lurched, stabilization fried, spinning like a drunk bird. Outcast Girl tried to save it, but the drone spiraled out a window. Right then, Han Feng's timer hit 0. The fireworks strapped to their only aerial toy went off, blowing in the cold night sky like some twisted Arctic New Year. The blast killed the right propeller, and now the drone was toast. Desperate, Outcast Girl yanked controls for an emergency landing, aiming for a ledge outside one of the floors. Meanwhile, Han Feng suited up, ready to go fetch their busted toy. That drone wasn't just a gadget, it was everything. But when their aerial cam zoomed in on the stairwell, they spotted something weird. Lying there in the ice was a body. On closer look, it wasn't just any corpse. It looked exactly like Brother Li. Han Feng cursed under his breath, wondering what the hell the gangster was doing out there. Maybe he got jumped too. Now, there were 2 reasons to head out, the drone and Li. Han Feng told his roommate flat out not to open the door for anyone. He packed light essentials, strapped on a radio from Outcast Girl, and, as a final touch, holstered his pistol. Loaded, locked, praying he wouldn't have to use it. With a flashlight cutting through the dark, Han Feng crept down the stairwell. Floors 17, 16, and 15 were clear. The raiders had already tucked tail and run. But the drone's readout showed outside temps at minus 49.8 degrees Celsius. Out there, without gear, a human wouldn't last minutes. Hell, maybe not even seconds. Brother Li was in serious danger, and Han Feng knew he'd have to move fast if he wanted to drag his bro back alive. Meanwhile, the scouting team came back and reported what went down on the upper floors. Mr. Zhang just sat there calm as hell, listened to everything, and then thanked them for their effort. For all their trouble, the only reward was 3 thick-ass coats and a pack of noodles each. With resources this scarce, those noodle packs were basically gold, handed out only to people actually pulling their weight. Looking raggedy as fuck, Li Hyona stepped up and asked Mr. Zhang if she could finally join their squad. He shut her down cold again. Right now, they couldn't even confirm if Han Feng was behind this attack. If Uncle Liu hadn't personally seen someone shifting supplies before the chaos, Mr. Zhang wouldn't even bother entertaining her story. For now, they needed numbers to storm the floor ahead. Whether Hyona's info was real or bullshit would get proven in the next op. This was her one shot to prove her worth. Gripping a steel pipe tight in both hands, she looked dead set on doing whatever it takes to get in. Before moving out, Mr. Zhang reminded everyone that manpower was their most valuable resource, and nobody better be throwing their lives away. With the smiling big boss leading the way, a decent-sized raiding crew formed and hit the stairs. Halfway up, they ran into Brother Li lying there unconscious, freezing his ass off. Mr. Jiang pulled out a hot water canister, forced it to his lips, and the bastard woke up with his tongue burning. When his eyes finally opened, he saw the raiding force crowding him and gave him a look full of pure contempt. He clicked his tongue, pissed that these bastards were the ones to drag him back. Mr. Jiang's loyal lapdog barked up quick, demanding Brother Li thank the boss for saving his life. Brother Li just laughed, bitter and sarcastic. He still wasn't bowing down to the collective's rules, calling them out as fake-ass heroes hiding behind the mask of thieves. The lapdog tried to curse him out and throw hands, but Mr. Jiang stopped him. With his trademark smile, the shady boss once again invited Brother Li to join up. And once again, Brother Li spat rejection right back in his face. The raiding crew was getting pissed. Dude was stubborn as hell, refusing to bend even after being saved. Before he could walk away and head further upstairs, Mr. Jiang grabbed him by the shoulders, grinning wide like some shady bastard trying to play nice. He asked if there was some kind of misunderstanding and claimed they only wanted to strengthen their group to give the weaker one a shot at survival. But Brother Li could see straight through that phony smile. The so-called committee protecting the weak was literally starving the elderly, rationing them just one meal every 3 days, straight up a death sentence in this hellhole. And since Brother Li had no family left to be used as leverage, that guilt-tripping shit wasn't going to fly on him. Up the stairs, Han Feng was listening to every word. What he heard only confirmed what he already suspected. Jiang Xiu didn't give two shits about protecting people. It made sense why they wanted to reel in a younger crowd while letting the old, weak, sick, and disabled just rot. If this crap kept going, the committee would tear itself apart from the inside. Done with Brother Li's mouth, the lapdog lunged in again, barking in his face about how ungrateful he was. But the idiot made the mistake of stepping right into Brother Li's range. Without hesitation, the gangster with a heart of gold smashed his forehead right into the mutt skull. That headbutt rocked him so hard that Brother Li's whole body shook in pain, but he stayed standing on business. His glare alone was enough to make the armed raiders step back for a second. Mr. Jiang's men stood there, waiting silently for his signal. The boss hesitated, but then the raiders started creeping in again, fear still in their eyes, but numbers giving them courage. Brother Li, swaying on his feet, body trembling and barely holding on, still raised himself against those thieving bastards and dared them to come. From one floor above, Han Feng saw his bro about to collapse. He knew Li needed backup bad, but there were too many raiders swarming down there. Jumping in would be straight suicide. Still, this man had saved him too many times. Han Feng wasn't about to sit back and watch him throw his life away on a hopeless last stand. That's when an idea hit. He pulled out his pistol, aimed it down at the chaos, and kept his finger steady on the trigger. Calm as hell, blicky in hand, he watched the whole mess unfold. No one had even swung yet, but Brother Li was already swaying, looking like he'd hit the floor any second. Han Feng finally snapped at the sight of those raiders ganging up on Brother Li and let off a warning shot. The bullet whizzed past and almost smoked Mr. Jiang's little lap dog right in the crotch, sending the whole crowd into a panic. That gunshot ripped through the room and shredded their confidence. Nobody expected someone to be packing heat inside the building. Han Feng came down the stairs slow and steady, gun raised, telling everyone not to move. And damn, it worked. Those raiders froze instantly. Brother Li, still trembling and looking around, caught sight of that familiar piece and realized right away it was his little bro. While the scumbags were shitting their pants, Mr. Jiang stood there, freakishly calm in the chaos. Li Haiona's eyes went wide, seeing Han Feng stroll and strapped. Han Feng carefully passed Brother Li his house key, and together they started retreating inch by inch while keeping their eyes locked on the intruders. The underlings kept glancing at their boss, waiting for orders. Some idiots even thought about rushing the two while they were distracted, until Han Feng blasted another warning shot, shutting that idea down real quick. He'd already told them not to move, and now they were testing his patience. He barked at them to ditch their weapons and kneel. One by one, the raiders dropped their gear and sank down, their faces tense and eyes darting everywhere. That gave Han Feng and his bro just enough time to back off toward the room safely. Seconds dragged out in silence as the duo's footsteps faded. Then Mr. Jiang was the first to rise, asking the room if anyone knew who the hell that gunman was. Li Haiona wasted no time ratting him out, saying it was Han Feng, the very guy who owned the place they were planning to hit. That little snitch move made Jiang's lapdog lose it. yelling at the witch for not warning them that their target was an armed bastard. Mr. Jang cooled things down, saying Hyona had no reason to lie. Then he laid it out for his men. If this Han Feng guy has a gun, doesn't it make sense he's also sitting on supplies? That thought lit a fire under the whole pack of brainwashed losers. Jang was convinced the deliveries Uncle Lu saw before everything went to shit were the real deal. The idea of scoring more supplies had everyone hyped, but still, the plan wasn't simple. One wrong move, and someone could catch a bullet. Mr. Jang, though, was sure Han Feng was too much of a wuss to actually kill anyone. Otherwise, he would have capped a few of them already. Besides, no one can hole up inside their place forever and never step out. So the boss gave his crew a rundown. They'd fall back, regroup, and set up safety measures before returning. Their new goal, take down room 1804 at all costs. Meanwhile, our duo finally made it outside their room. Brother Li's hands were still shaking so bad he could barely get the key in the lock, while Han Feng stood watch, finger tight on the trigger, ready for any bullshit. At last, Li got the door open, and a wave of warm air washed over him, a feeling he'd been craving ever since this nightmare started. Inside, Brother Li froze in awe. A working radiator, a humming generator, and behind one of the glass doors, a stash of supplies so massive it could make anyone drool. He turned to his little bro, eyes wide, wondering what the hell was up with this paradise of a room. While he was busy marveling at the setup, the outcast girl poked her head out of her room, asking if Han Feng had retrieved the drone. And that's when it hit him. He'd been so caught up rescuing his bro that he completely forgot about the reason he went down there in the first place. 2 hours and a couple of heavy meals later, Brother Li finally caught up on at least part of the real story. Han Feng kept it simple, telling the gullible gangster that he had predicted the disaster ahead of time and stocked up as best as he could. He even threw in an apology for not filling him in sooner, explaining that he was just worried his stash info might leak out, so he kept the circle small. When the food was done, Brother Li got up and bowed deep, full of gratitude. Without his little bro, he'd be starving in the cold, already dead. Just being able to eat hot food again felt like pure kindness. When he lifted his head, tears were already rolling down his face. Han Feng brushed it off, saying it was nothing more than paying back the help Li had given him before. The guy was moved to his core and straight up praised Han Feng for being a real one. Since he was there, Brother Li went on to share how things were looking in the building now. The last update he had given Han Feng was back before the power outage, but since then, everything had flipped upside down. That bastard Jang had been running around stealing people's supplies in the name of collectivism. He gathered a crew of followers fast, but also earned himself some serious haters. Some couldn't handle living off scraps and dipped out, but Jang didn't care. On the low, he sent his attack dog Jin Chin Wu to deal with anyone who deserted, claiming it was for the safety of the group. That part shocked Han Feng, because the Jin twins, Chin Wu and Chin Win, used to be sweet, smart, and kind, nothing like the shady lapdogs they'd turned into. Jang's committee had blown up in size with dirty tricks, but Brother Li believed karma was real and that evil always gets its payback. Their biggest screw-up was trying to rob a guy named Li Yonghao. Problem was, this dude wasn't just anyone. He was a former middleweight boxing champ. Naturally, Jang's goons got wrecked and humiliated. But Jang was too stubborn to admit defeat, too scared to lose face and authority. So under his orders, the raiders kept going after Yonghao. Every single one of them ended up beaten in a bloody pulp. Because of that, the boxer started building his own following. And from that crew, 2 names were standing out. First was Yung Yang Yu, a die-hard boxing fan who had been in underground fights for years. He was infamous for his insane speed. Then there was Jin Zhang Xia, another hardcore follower of Yonghao, a dude with beast-like strength and a massive build that made him look like a monster. With those 2 backing the champ, a new faction was forming fast, and they had nothing but pure hate for Jang Shiyu's fake-ass hypocrisy. Brother Li explained that Jang was getting desperate. His empire was starting to shake, so the bastard decided to target Han Feng's supplies. Li had tried to warn him, but ended up passing out on the stairs before he could. The silver lining? It showed that Jang's empire was rotting from the inside, piece by piece. While the trio were figuring out their next move, nasty skittering sounds echoed from outside. Outcast Girl pulled up the live camera feed by the door, and sure enough, raiders were swarming right outside. Han Feng jumped up, ready to set his electric door handle trap, but she stopped him, warning him about that stinky sulfur smell creeping in from the hallway. Before anyone could even react, the whole room shook. An explosion went off outside. These psychos weren't holding back. Mr. Jiang and his crew were actually tossing bombs. From the sound of it, they were using localized demolition charges, not super strong, but still dangerous as hell. Watching the feed, it all clicked. The reason they were dragging around those bulky riot shields. And yeah, it became obvious real quick that Lee Hyona was the snitch feeding these bastards intel. As the raiders prepped another round of explosives, Han Feng rushed to plug in his electric trap. Seconds later, a blood-curdling scream rang out. It worked. Some poor idiot got fried. The rest flinched back in panic, but Mr. Jiang barked at them to keep placing charges. This time, he ordered them to double up on the packets and aim for the edges of the door. Blindly following orders, the raiders wired the walls and blew them up again. The boom cracked the walls but couldn't bust through. The door's defenses were tanking the hits. Mr. Jiang wasn't buying that the bombs were weak. He figured the defenses were just too damn good. Refusing to let go, he pushed the load up to 3 packets, dead set on tearing this place down today. Inside, Han Feng and brother Li scrambled to barricade the entrance as best as they could. The third explosion rattled everything, knocked their barricade out of place, and nearly shattered their eardrums. The noise was brutal, but what followed was worse, a weird cracking sound spreading through the walls. The explosives were slowly winning. If it kept up, those cracks would only spread wider until the walls finally caved. Barricading wasn't going to cut it anymore. Han Feng had another idea. He told them to ditch the junk they had shoved against the entrance. Outcast Girl jumped in to help, and Brother Li just scoffed at the thought that this small doll could be of any real use, until she casually lifted her hands and summoned her black hole. The second it pulled in all the heavy debris, Brother Li's jaw nearly hit the floor. Work that should have taken minutes was gone in a blink. The guy was straight up rattled, realizing just how dangerous her power really was. With no time to explain, Han Feng fired up his purple light, coating his hands as he rushed toward the cracked walls. He spread that glow across the surface, softening it like clay so he could reshape the fractures. He had to stay laser-focused, because if he slipped, the walls would take forever to harden again. Once all the cracks were under control, he switched to his green light, stacking it on top. The combo actually worked. Purple and green together could repair and reinforce the walls right there on the spot. Brother Li just stood there tweaking, watching his 2 new roommates pull off god-tier tricks that shouldn't even exist. Outcast Girl popped her head back in, super chill, and told them to duck just in time for yet another explosion. The 3 of them crouched low and covered their ears as the blast ripped through. Han Feng had just finished patching the walls, but new fractures were already forming. The raiders had switched tactics. Now, they were bombing the damn floor. If that was the case, it didn't matter how many times he patched things up, it'd be pointless. Han Feng knew he needed a new plan, something risky, something that demanded absolute trust from everyone involved. Outcast Girl was down for whatever, and Brother Li was ride or die to the core. No matter how crazy the move sounded, both of them were ready to follow Han Feng's lead to the letter. After a few more blasts, the door to room 1804 finally gave way. Those demolition charges did their thing, ripping the entrance wide open. The raiders stormed in slow and steady, shields up, eyes peeled, ready to snatch every scrap they could find. Mr. Jiang kept barking reminders about possible ambush angles while his crew spread through Han Feng's place. They tore through the kitchen and living room only to find pure trash and a random box of seeds. Wasting that much firepower for garbage and seeds had the crew pissed, and naturally, their suspicion turned to Lee Hyona. She swore she wasn't lying and pointed them toward the bedroom. But the second they touched the last door, Brother Li exploded out, kicking a shield right into their faces, with Han Feng backing him up, pistol in hand. He aimed at Jiang and squeezed the trigger without hesitation, but the heavy-duty shield ate the bullet. Han Feng warned the idiots to back off before he stopped being polite. From behind the shields, Jiang puffed himself up, accusing Han Feng of hoarding and letting people starve. He spat some sanctimonious crap about collective justice and clearing one's conscience by handing over resources. Han Feng couldn't stand that moral kidnapper routine. Jiang's words sounded lofty, but the dude was basically a scam artist dressed as a savior. Still, his lackeys lapped it up, hungry-eyed like a pack of wolves. Instead of cracking, Han Feng flipped the script. He threw on his best offended face, demanding to know what supplies they thought he had. Hyona butted in, doubling down that he must have stashed it all away. She swore she'd seen light and even felt heat last time. Her voice grated on him, so he let off another shot, making her buckle in fear. The shield saved her skull, but Han Feng shredded her with words, calling her shameless and reminding everyone she'd scammed him before, swapping food and essentials for useless seeds that left him broke and struggling. That was enough to start turning the raiders against her. Unfortunately for Han Feng, Zhang wasn't dumb enough to let his squad splinter. He cut in with a fair idea. Just check the bedroom. Han Feng played tough, but allowed it, guns still trained on them. They ransacked the place for minutes and came back with nothing but more trash and a little girl. The outcast chick nailed her part, clinging to Han Feng like he was her brother and crying about being scared and hungry. Now the raiders were steaming. Half a day of busting down doors and blowing charges for literally nothing had them on edge. Zhang's temper flared, and he demanded answers from Hyona. After all that wasted time and resources, she'd better explain, or they'd happily rip her apart. The witch cracked under the pressure, insisting she wasn't a liar, but nobody was buying it. Desperate, she flipped it on Han Feng again, claiming he was tricking everyone. Losing it completely, Hyona bolted from shield cover and rushed Han Feng, blinding him with a flashlight before yanking his gun in a messy scuffle. In a twisted stroke of luck, she actually got the pistol and leveled it at Han Feng's chest, screaming for him to reveal his stash. The raiders just stared, thinking she'd lost her damn mind, but she kept threatening to pull the trigger. Han Feng stood his ground, repeating that she'd already drained him of everything long ago. Right before she could fire, the raiders snapped and knocked the gun out of her hands, restraining her while she shrieked that she wasn't lying. Han Feng reached for his weapon, but Zhang scooped it up first. He held the pistol steady, eyes locked on Han Feng, while his goons trashed Hyona, yelling about the wild goose chase she sent them on. Just before they went too far with the pipes, Zhang stepped in again, halting the beatdown. With the raid blown to hell, Zhang shifted into damage control. Playing the hypocrite, he reminded his crew they weren't some bloodthirsty gang and that Han Feng's home wasn't an execution ground. He waved the gun for dramatic effect before flipping the vibe, offering Hyona a chance to redeem herself. Then, shockingly, he apologized to Han Feng for the chaos and even handed the pistol back. Acting like a big man, Zhang promised a proper explanation later and invited Han Feng to join the so-called committee. He told him to think it over and give an answer at the supply spot tomorrow before pulling his gang out. Finally, the house fell quiet. The trio, Han Feng, Brother Li, and the outcast girl, were left standing in the trashed, empty place. Han Feng slumped, worried about Brother Li, but eventually let out a breath of relief. The performance was over. Now, they could finally kick back with the comfort of electricity and warmth. But since his spot was compromised, they packed up and shifted to the outcast girl's apartment right above. Shockingly cozy and spacious, it was thanks to her place that their staged act had looked so damn convincing in the first place. Before the raiders even broke in, Han Feng had already lined everything up with a flawless plan. First move, stash all the valuables and resources inside Outcast Girl's subspace, completely out of reach. To sell the act, they left behind random trash and wrappers, scattered like evidence of desperation. They even cracked the windows open to drop the room's temperature fast, making it look like they'd been out of supplies for a long time. The idea was simple: trick those committee bastards into wasting their energy busting into a place that held nothing. Meanwhile, the trio sat back celebrating with a fat meal, knowing damn well Zhang Shiyu's failed raid had turned up empty. That blunder was bound to piss off the rest of the crew. In that kind of mess, the greedy raiders would start pointing fingers at whoever looked weakest. And since Han Feng had a gun, the unarmed Li Hyona, who already had plenty of haters, was definitely set up to take the worst of it. The plan clicked perfectly, but it didn't play out without bumps. Han Feng's gun got snatched, but he had seen that coming as the worst-case scenario. He figured once Zhang Shiyu grabbed it, he leaned toward keeping things peaceful just to protect his so-called righteous image. And even if the psycho decided to shoot instead, Han Feng had already fired off 2 rounds and left the mag empty. So when the raiders took the weapon, it only made the whole act look even more legit. With that, Brother Li finally eased up, thinking all they had to do now was fake suffering on the outside while secretly living like kings. But Han Feng had his sights set way higher. From here on out, their real mission wasn't just surviving, it was bringing the entire committee down.